Edward's Day Out. Once upon a time there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. They said, "The driver won't choose you again. He wants big, strong engines like us." Edward hadn't been out for a long time, and he began to feel sad. Just then the driver and fireman came along to start work. The driver looked at Edward and said, "What's the matter? Are you feeling sad? Would you like to come out today? And Edward said, "Oh yes, please." So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away. And he blew his whistle. "Look at me. Look 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 at me." The other engines were very cross at being left behind, and away went Edward to get some coaches. "Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me." At last Edward found the coaches, and they said, "Oh, please be careful, Edward. Don't bump and bang us like the other engines do." So Edward came up to the coaches very, very gently. And the shunter fastened the coupling. The coaches were very pleased. "Thank you, Edward. That was kind. We are glad you're taking us today." Then they went to the station where the people were waiting. "Here we are, here we are, here we are, here we are, here we are." "Come along, get in quickly, please." So the people got in quickly, and Edward waited happily for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag. He waited and waited, and there was no whistle and no green flag. Edward was getting anxious. "Where is that guard?" The driver and fireman asked the station master. Have you seen the guard? No." They asked the porter. Have you seen the guard? Yes, last night." Edward began to get cross. Are we ever going to start? Just then a little boy shouted, "Here he comes!" And there the guard was, running down the hill with his flags in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He ran onto the platform, blew his whistle, and jumped into his van. Edward puffed off. "Here we go, shh, shh, here 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 we go, shh, shh." He did have a happy day. All the children ran to wave as he went past, and he met old friends at all the stations. He worked so hard that the driver promised to take him out again next day. And he told the other engines in the shed that night, "I'm going out again tomorrow. What do you think of that, But he didn't hear what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Edward and Gordon. One of the engines in Edward's shed was called Gordon. He was very big and very proud. "You watch me this afternoon, little Edward. When I rush through with the express, that'll be a splendid sight for you." Just then his driver pulled the lever.
"Goodbye, little Edward. Look out for me this afternoon. Mm, mm, Goodbye, little Edward."
Edward went off too to do some shunting. Edward liked shunting. It was fun playing with trucks. He would come up quietly and give them a quick pull, and the trucks would scream out, "Oh, oh, 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 oh,
Oh, whatever's happening?
Then Edward would stop quickly, and the silly trucks would bump into each other. "Oh, oh, 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 oh." Edward pushed them until they were running nicely, and when they weren't expecting it, he would stop. One of them would be sure to run onto the other line. Edward played till there were no more trucks. Then he stopped to rest. Presently he heard a whistle, and Gordon came puffing along very slowly and very crossly. Instead of nice shining coaches, he was pulling a lot of very dirty coal trucks.
A goods train. A goods train. The shame of it. The shame of it. The shame of it. Oh dear. Oh dear.
He went slowly through with the trucks clattering and banging behind him. Edward laughed and went to find some more trucks. Soon afterwards a porter came and spoke to Edward's driver. "Yeah, Gordon can't get up the hill. Will you take Edward and push him, please?" They found Gordon halfway up the hill, and he was very cross. His driver and fireman were talking to him severely. "You're not trying, Gordon. You're not trying at all." And Gordon said,
"I can't do it. I can't do it. The noisy trucks hold an engine back so. If there were coaches now, clean, sensible things that come quietly, that would be different."
Edward's driver came up. "Here, we've come to push you."
"Oh, it's no use at all."
"Well, you wait and see." They brought the train back to the bottom of the hill. Edward came up behind the brake van. "I'm ready."
"It's no good."
The guard blew his whistle, and they pulled and pushed as hard as they could. Gordon pulled.
"I can't do it. I can't do it."
Edward pushed. "I will do it. I will do it."
"I can't do it."
"I will do it." Edward pushed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could, and almost before he realized it, Gordon found himself at the top of the hill.
"I've done it. I've done it. I've done it."
And he forgot all about Edward pushing behind. He didn't wait to say thank you, but ran on so fast that he passed 2 stations before his driver could make him stop. Edward had pushed so hard that when he got to the top, he was out of breath. Gordon ran on so fast that Edward was left behind. The guard waved and waved, but Edward couldn't catch up. He ran on to the next station, and there the driver and fireman said they were very pleased with him. The fireman gave him a nice long drink. And the driver said, "I'll get my paint out tomorrow and give you a beautiful new coat of blue with red stripes. Then you'll be the smartest engine in the shed." The Sad Story of Henry. Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked through its funnel and never came out again. The engine's name was Henry. His driver and fireman argued with him, but he wouldn't move. He said,
No, I shan't come out, so there. The rain will spoil my lovely green paint with red stripes. No.
The guard blew his whistle till he had no more breath, and waved his flags till his arms ached. But Henry stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him.
Go away. Go away. I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you.
The passengers came and argued too, but Henry would not move.
No. No. Leave me alone.
A fat director who was on the train told the guard to get a rope.
Fetch a rope, will you? That's right. Now, Henry, we will pull you out.
But Henry only blew steam at him and made him wet.
Leave me alone.
They hooked the rope on, and all pulled except the fat director.
My doctor has forbidden me to pull, don't you know?
They pulled and pulled and pulled, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Then they tried pushing from the other end. The fat director said,
1, 2, 3, push!
But he didn't help himself. He said,
My doctor has forbidden me to push.
They pushed and pushed and pushed, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. At last another train came. The guard waved his red flag and stopped it. The 2 engine drivers, the 2 firemen, and the 2 guards went and argued with Henry. "Look, Henry, it's stopped raining."
Yes, but it'll begin again soon, and what would become of my green paint with red stripes then?
So they brought the other engine up, and it pushed and puffed, and puffed and pushed, as hard as ever it could. But still Henry stayed in the tunnel. So they gave it up, and the fat director told Henry,
We shall leave you there for always and always and always.
They cut a new tunnel through the hill, they took up the old rails, and they built a big brick wall in front of Henry. Now Henry can't get out, and he watches the trains rushing through the new tunnel. He's very sad because no one will ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again. But I think he deserved it, don't you? Edward, Gordon, and Henry. Edward and Gordon often went through the tunnel where Henry was shut up. Edward would say, "Hello," and Gordon would say,
"Serves you right."
Poor Henry had no steam to answer. His fire had gone out. Soot and dirt from the tunnel roof had spoiled his lovely green paint and red stripes. He was cold and unhappy, and wanted to come out and pull trains too. Gordon always pulled the express. He was proud of being the only engine strong enough to do it. There were many heavy coaches full of important people like the fat director who'd punished Henry. Gordon was seeing how fast he could go. Faster, 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 faster. Faster, 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 faster. Faster, 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 faster. And the coaches went. Gordon could see Henry's tunnel in front, and he thought to himself,
"In a minute, I'll just go at Henry and rush through and out into the open again."
Closer and closer he came. He was almost there when...
"Oh dear! Oh, what's happened? Oh."
Gordon was in a cloud of steam and going slower and slower. His driver stopped the train.
"Oh, what has happened to me? Oh, I feel so weak."
And the driver said, "You've burst your safety valve. You can't pull the train any more."
"Oh dear, and we were going so nicely too. Look at Henry laughing at me."
Gordon made a face at Henry and blew smoke at him.
"Stop it."
Everybody got out and came to see Gordon. The fat director said,
Yes, I never liked these big engines. Always going wrong. Send for another engine at once."
While the guard went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon and ran him onto a siding out of the way. The only engine left in the shed was Edward. Edward, Gordon isn't feeling very well. Will you come and pull his coaches for him?" "Well, I'll try." Gordon saw Edward coming.
"Oh, he's no use. Edward can't pull a train."
Edward puffed and pulled and pulled and puffed, but he couldn't move the heavy coaches.
"I told you so. Why not let Henry try,
And the fat director said,
"All right, I will. Henry, will you help pull this train?"
And Henry was delighted.
"Oh, yes, certainly. Only too pleased."
So Gordon's driver and fireman lit his fire, some plate layers broke down the wall and put back the rails, and when he had steam up, Henry puffed out. He was dirty. His boiler was black and he was covered with cobwebs.
Oh, I'm so stiff. I'm so stiff.
"You'd better have a run and ease your joints and find a turntable."
Henry came back feeling much better, and they put him in front. Edward said, "I'm ready."
"So am I." "Pull hard, pull hard."
"We'll do it. We'll do it.
"Pull hard."
We'll do it." The heavy coaches jerked and began to move. slowly at first, then faster and faster.
We've done it together!
We've done it together!
We've done it together!
We've done it together! Hooray, you've done it! Hooray, you've done it! Hooray, you've done it! All the passengers were so excited, the fat director leaned out of the window to wave to Edward and Henry, but the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field, where a goat ate it for his tea. They never stopped till they came to the big station at the end of the line. The passengers all got out and said thank you, and the fat director promised Henry a new coat of paint.
Would you like blue and red?
Oh, yes, please. Then I'll be like Edward and Gordon. That will be nice.
Thomas and Gordon. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He was a fussy little engine, always pulling coaches about. He pulled them to the station, ready for the big engines to take out on long journeys. And when trains came in and the people had got out, he would pull the empty coaches away so that the big engines could go and rest. He was cheeky, too. He used to play tricks on the other engines. He liked to come quietly beside them and make them jump. One day, Gordon was resting on a siding. He was very tired. The big express had been late. He was just going to sleep when Thomas came up in his cheeky way. "Wake up, lazy bones! Do some hard work for a change. You can't catch me!" And he ran off laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gordon thought how he could pay Thomas out. One morning, Thomas wouldn't wake up. It was nearly time for the express. The people were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas started.
Oh, dear. Oh, sure.
The coaches were very impatient. "Come on, hurry up, hurry up. We'll be late." Thomas gave them a rude bump. "Oh, oh, 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 oh," and started for the station. "Shh, shh, 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 shh. Come on, stop dawdling, stop dawdling." The coaches were now very cross. "Where have you been? Where have you been?" Thomas fussed into the station, and Gordon said,
Hurry up, you!
"Hurry up yourself."
Don't worry, I will.
And almost before the coaches had stopped moving, Gordon came out of his siding and was coupled to the train.
Come on, get in quickly, please.
So the people got in quickly. The signal went down, the clock struck the hour, the guard waved his green flag, and Gordon was ready to start. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first, so that when the train was running nicely, he could stop and go back. This time he was late, and Gordon started so quickly that they forgot to uncouple Thomas. The heavy train slowly began to move out of the station. Gordon grunted at the coaches.
Come on, Come on. Shh.
Thomas teased Gordon. Pull harder! Pull harder! The train went faster and faster. Too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't. Stop! Stop! I can't keep up! You're going too fast! Gordon laughed. Faster, 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 faster. And the coaches chuckled with glee. You can't get away, you can't get away, you can't get away, you can't get away. Poor Thomas was going faster than he'd ever been before. He was out of breath and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on and on and on. Oh dear, 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 oh dear. I shall never be the same again. I shall never be the same again. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. My wheels will be quite worn out. At last they stopped. Everyone laughed to see Thomas puffing and panting behind. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. They uncoupled him, and he ran onto a siding out of the way. Gordon chuckled as he passed.
Well, little Thomas, now you know what hard work means, don't you,
Poor Thomas couldn't answer. He had no breath. He just puffed slowly away to rest. And he had a long, long drink. And he was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again. Thomas's train. Thomas often grumbled because he was not allowed to pull passenger trains. The other engines laughed.
You are too impatient, Thomas. You'd be sure to leave something behind.
This annoyed Thomas. Rubbish! You just wait. I'll show you. One night he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard on him, but he didn't get better. Now, Henry usually pulled the first train in the morning, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. And Thomas thought to himself, now, if Henry is ill, perhaps I shall pull his train. And Thomas ran off and found the coaches. Come along, come along. The coaches were very grumpy. There's plenty of time, there's plenty of time. Thomas took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once, but his driver wouldn't let him. Now, don't be impatient, Thomas. So Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The guard and the station master walked up and down. The porters banged the doors. And still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited every minute. The fat director came out of his office to see what was the matter. And the guard and the station master told him about Henry. Well, Henry's not very well today.
We'll find another engine.
Well, there's only Thomas.
Well, you'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now.
So Thomas ran round to the front and backed down onto the coaches, ready to start. He was so excited his driver had to say to him, now don't be impatient, Thomas. Wait till everything is ready. But Thomas was too excited to listen to a word he said. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Perhaps Thomas was too impatient to wait till they were ready, or perhaps his driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started. People shouted and waved at him, but he didn't stop. Thomas thought to himself, they're waving because I'm such a splendid engine. Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy. and he pretended to be like Gordon. Faster, 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 faster. Faster, 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 faster. As he passed the first signal box, he saw the man leaning out, waving and shouting. And he thought to himself, "They're pleased with me. They've never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of 'em to wave." And he hurried on. Faster, 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 faster. Faster, 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 faster. But he came to a signal at danger. "Oh, bother! I must stop. Oh, and I was going so nicely too." What a nuisance signals are! And he blew an angry... One of the signalmen ran up. "Hello, Thomas. What are you doing here, "Well, I'm pulling a train. Can't you see?" "Oh, where are your coaches then?" Thomas looked back. "Why, bless me if I haven't left 'em behind." "Yes, you'd better go back quickly and fetch them." Poor Thomas. He was so sad he nearly cried. But his driver said, "Cheer up. Let's go back quickly and try again." At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling the fat director, the station master, and the guard what a bad railway it was. But when Thomas came back, and they saw how sad he was, they couldn't be cross. So they coupled him to the train, and this time he really pulled it. But for a long time afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said,
"Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train, but forgot about the coaches."
Thomas and the Trucks. Thomas used to grumble in the shed at night. "I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world." The others didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine with a long tongue. But one night Edward came into the shed. He was a kind little engine, and he felt sorry for Thomas. "Thomas, I've got some trucks to take home tomorrow. If you take them instead, I'll push the coaches to the yard." Thomas was delighted. "Thank you, Edward. That will be nice." So they asked their drivers next day if they could change, and the drivers said, "Well, yes. Well, yes." And Thomas ran off happily to find the trucks. Now, trucks are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they're doing. They don't listen to their engine, and when he stops, they bump into each other screaming, "Oh, oh, 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 whatever is happening?" And I'm sorry to say they play tricks on an engine who's not used to them. Edward knew all about trucks, and he warned Thomas to be careful. But Thomas was too excited to listen. The shunter fastened the coupling, and the signal dropped. Thomas was ready. The guard blew his whistle. Thomas answered and started off. But the trucks weren't ready. "Oh, oh, 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 wait, Thomas, wait." But Thomas wouldn't wait. "Come on, come on, And the trucks grumbled slowly out of the siding onto the main line. Thomas was happy. "Come along, come along, come along, come along, come along, And the trucks grumbled, "All right, don't fuss. All right, don't fuss. Bong, 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 bong." They clattered through stations and rumbled over bridges. Come along, shh, shh, come along, shh, shh, come along, shh, shh. And they rushed through the tunnel in which Henry had been shut up. Then they came to the top of the hill where Gordon had stuck, and Thomas's driver said, "Steady now, Thomas, steady." And he shut off the steam and began to put on the brakes. Thomas called out, "We're stopping! We're stopping!" And the trucks answered back, "No, no, 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 no." And they bumped into each other. Go on, go on, go on, go on, go on. And before his driver could stop them, they'd pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, long, 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 ha ha, long, long. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. "Stop pushing! Shh, 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 shh. Stop pushing! Shh, 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 shh. Stop pushing!" Shh, shh, shh. But the trucks wouldn't stop. They just giggled in their silly way. Ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, bong bong, bong bong, ha ha. Thomas was glad when they got to the bottom. Then he saw in front the place where they had to stop. "Oh dear, what shall I do?" They rattled through the station, and luckily the line was clear, and they swerved into the goods yard. Thomas put his brakes on tight, and he skidded along the rails. "Oh, I must stop!" And he shut his eyes tight. When he opened them, he saw that he'd stopped just in front of the buffers, and there watching him was the fat director.
"Thomas, what are you doing here,
"Well, I've brought Edward's trucks."
"Oh, why did you come so fast?"
"Well, I didn't mean to. I was pushed."
"Pushed? Haven't you pulled trucks before?"
"No."
"Then you've a lot to learn about trucks, little Thomas. They're silly things and must be kept in their place. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine."
Thomas and the Breakdown Train. Every day the fat director came to the station to catch his train, and he always nodded to Thomas and said,
Morning, Thomas."
There were lots of trucks in the yard, and Thomas had to push and pull them into their right places. He worked hard. He knew now that he wasn't so clever as he'd thought, and he wanted to learn all about trucks so as to be a really useful engine. But on the siding, by themselves, were some trucks that Thomas was told he mustn't touch. There was a small coach, some flat trucks, and two queer things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train, Thomas, and when there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach, and the engine takes them quickly to help the hurt people, and to clear and mend the line. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks." One day Thomas heard an engine whistling. "Help! Help!" And a goods train came rushing through very fast. "Help! Help!" The engine, a new one called James, was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire, and smoke and sparks streamed out on each side. "They're pushing me! They're pushing me! Those silly trucks are pushing me!" And the trucks just laughed. "Ha ha! Ha ha! Ba 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 ba! Ha ha! Ba ba ha ha! Ba ba." Poor James disappeared under the bridge, whistling for help. Thomas the tank engine didn't know what to do. "Oh, I'd like to teach those trucks a lesson." Presently a man came, running.
"James is off the line. The breakdown train. Quickly!"
So Thomas was coupled on. The workmen jumped into their coach and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. Faster, faster. Faster, faster. Oh, bother those trucks and their tricks. I only hope poor James isn't hurt. Faster, faster. They found James and the trucks at a bend in the line. The brake van and the last few trucks were on the rails, but the front ones were piled in a heap. James was in a field, with a cow looking at him, and his driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt.
"Never mind, James. It wasn't your fault. We always said your wooden brakes was no good."
Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled the unhurt trucks out of the way.
Oh, oh, oh dear! Oh, don't hurt us, Thomas! Oh, 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 don't hurt us, Thomas!
"It serves you right! It serves you right!" He puffed backwards and forwards all the afternoon, and he scolded the trucks. "This'll teach you a lesson! This'll teach you a lesson!" And the trucks answered in groany, creaky sort of voices,
"Yes, it will. Oh, yes, it will. Oh, oh."
Then, when they put James back onto the rails, he tried to move, but he couldn't. So Thomas helped him back to the shed. The fat director was waiting anxiously for them.
"Well, Thomas, I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you, well, you shall have a branch line all to yourself."
"Oh, sir, thank you." Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line all to himself and puffs proudly backwards and forwards with 2 coaches all day. He's never lonely, because there's always some engine to talk to at the junction. Edward and Henry stop there quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry and doesn't stop, but he never forgets to say to Thomas, and Thomas in return always whistles, James and the Top Hat. James was a new engine who lived at a station at the other end of the line. He had 2 small wheels in front and 6 driving wheels behind. They weren't as big as Gordon's, and they weren't as small as Thomas's. The fat controller told him,
"You're a special mixed traffic engine. You'll be able to pull coaches or trucks quite easily."
But trucks are not easy things to manage, and on his first day they'd pushed James down a hill into a field. He'd been ill after the accident, but now he had new brakes and a shining coat of red paint. The fat controller was quite kind to James.
"The red paint will cheer you up after your accident. You can pull coaches today, and Edward can help you."
So James and Edward went together to find the coaches. Edward knew all about coaches and trucks.
"Be careful with the coaches, James. They don't like being bumped. Trucks are silly and noisy. They need to be bumped and taught to behave, but coaches get cross and will pay you out."
They took the coaches to the platform and were both coupled on in front. The fat controller, the station master, and some little boys all came to admire James's shining rods and red paint. James was so pleased. "I'm a really splendid engine. I'm so excited. I feel like going... James let off steam. The Fat Controller, the station master, and the guard all jumped, and a shower of water fell on the Fat Controller's nice new top hat. Then the whistle blew, and James thought they'd better go. So they went. "Go on, Edward. Shh, 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 shh. Go on, Edward. Shh, 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 shh. Don't push. Shh. Don't push. Don't push." Edward didn't like starting quickly. Neither did the coaches. "Don't go so fast. Don't go so fast. Don't go so fast. Don't go so fast." But James didn't listen. He just wanted to run away before the Fat Controller could call him back. He didn't even want to stop at the first station. And Edward had to say, "James, James, stop at once." Even so, 2 coaches in front were beyond the platform before they stopped, and they had to go back to let the passengers out. Lots of people came to look at James, but as no one seemed to know about the Fat Controller's top hat, James felt happier. Presently they came to the junction where Thomas was waiting with his 2 coaches. Thomas was pleased to see James. "Hello, James. Feeling better?" "Yes, thank you. That's right." "Ha! That's my guard's whistle. I must be off. Sorry I can't stop. I don't know what that Fat Controller would do without me to run his branch line." "Ta-ra! Shh, shh, ta-ra! Shh, shh, ta-ra! Shh, shh, ta-ra! Shh, 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 and off he puffed with his 2 coaches into a tunnel. Edward and James pulled away from the junction. They passed the field where James had had his accident. The fence was mended, and the cows back again. James whistled at them, but they paid no attention. On went James and Edward, through Edward's station yard, and they started to climb the hill beyond. "It's ever so steep. It's ever so steep.
I've done it before. I've done it before.
It's steep, but we'll do it.
It's steep, but we'll do it."
And the 2 engines puffed together as they pulled the train up the long hill. They both rested at the next station, and Edward told James the story of how Gordon had stuck on the hill and he had had to push him up. James laughed so much he got hiccups. He made so much noise he frightened an old lady in a black bonnet, and she dropped all her parcels. 3 porters, the station master, and the guard had to run after her, picking them up. James got quieter in his shed that night. He had enjoyed his day, but he was a little afraid of what the Fat Controller would say about the top hat. James and the Bootlace. Next morning, the Fat Controller spoke severely to James.
"If you can't behave, I shall take away your red coat and have you painted blue. So there."
James didn't like that at all, and he was very rough with the coaches as he brought them to the platform. "Oh, come along, shh! Come along, shh!" And the coaches grumbled, "All in good time, all in good time. Oh, stop grumbling and come on. Shh, 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 shh." and James snorted into the station with the coaches grumbling after him. James was cross that morning. Gordon never fetches his own coaches, and he's only painted blue, where a splendid red engine like me should never have to fetch his own coaches. And he puffed and snorted round to the front of the train and backed onto it with a rude bump. Oh, 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 went the coaches. That was too bad. And no one came near James. He felt very lonely. I'll show 'em. I'll show 'em. They think Gordon is the only engine who can pull coaches. Then the guard blew his whistle. And James started off with a tremendous jerk. Come on, shh, shh, come on, shh, shh, come on, shh, 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 shh. And off he went with the coaches squeaking and groaning. They clattered over the points and out onto the open line. Hurry, 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 shh, 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 hurry, 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 shh, 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 hurry, 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 shh, 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 shh. The coaches didn't like it. You're going too fast, you're going too fast, you're going too fast, you're going too fast. And indeed the coaches were going so fast that they swayed from side to side. James laughed and tried to go faster, but the coaches wouldn't let him. We're going to stop, we're going to stop, we're going to stop, we're going to stop, we're going to stop. And they stopped. James was very worried. He said to his driver, "What's the matter?" "What's the matter? You might as well ask. The brakes are hard on. There's a leak in the pipe, most likely. You've banged the coaches enough to make a leak in anything." The guard and the driver got down and looked at the brake pipes all along the train. At last they found a hole where the rough treatment had made a joint work loose. The guard said,
Well, how shall we mend it?
James's driver thought for a moment. "Well, we'll do it with newspapers and a leather bootlace."
Where's the bootlace coming from? We haven't got one.
"Well, we'll ask the passengers." So the guard made everyone get out.
Has anyone got a leather bootlace, please?
But they all said, "No,
No,
no, no, oh, no."
no.
Except one man in a bowler hat called Jeremiah Jobling, who tried to hide his feet. The guard said,
You have a leather bootlace there, I see, sir. Please give it to me.
And Jeremiah Jobling said,
No, I won't." "Well, then I'm afraid, sir, I'm very much afraid that this train will have to stop where it is, and it'll be all your fault."
Then the passengers all told Jeremiah Jobling what a mean man he was, and at last he gave them his laces. The driver tied a pad of newspapers tightly around the hole, and James was able to pull the train very gently. But he was a sadder and wiser James, and he took care never to bump coaches again. Troublesome Trucks. James didn't see the fat controller for several days. They left James alone in the shed. He was very unhappy. "Oh dear, I'll never be allowed out any more. I shall have to stay in this shed for always, and no one will ever see my red coat again. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. And James began to cry. Just then the fat controller came along.
Oh, I see that you're sorry, James. Well, I hope now that you'll be a better engine. You've given me a lot of trouble. People are laughing at my railway, and I don't like that at all. At all.
I'm very sorry, sir.
Well, that's a good engine. Well done. Now, I want you to pull some trucks for me, so run along and find them.
Oh, very good, sir. And James puffed happily away. Very soon he met a little tank engine. Hello, James. Here are your trucks. Have you got some bootlaces ready, eh? James took no notice, but backed down onto the trucks.
Oh, no, no, oh. We want a proper engine, not a red monster. No.
But James backed onto them and started as soon as the guard was ready. At last they saw Gordon's Hill ahead. James's driver said, "Now, look out for trouble, James. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Now, don't let them stop you." So James went faster, and they were soon halfway up the hill. "I'm doing it! Shh, shh, I'm doing it! Shh, shh, I'm doing it! Shh, shh, I'm doing it! Shh, 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 shh." Oh, but it was hard work. Then suddenly there was a jerk, and James got to the top easily. "Oh, I've done it! Shh, I've done it! Shh, I've done it! Shh, I've done it! Shh, hurrah! It's easy now! Shh, shh, shh." But the driver had shut off steam. "Those trucks have done it again, James. We've left our tail behind. Look." Sure enough, the last 10 trucks were running backwards down the hill. The coupling had snapped. But the guard was very brave. Very carefully and cleverly he made them stop. Then he got out and walked down the line with his red flag. James backed the other trucks carefully down the hill. Well, no wonder it was easy with 10 trucks running away like that. What silly things trucks are. Now, there might have been an accident. Meanwhile, the guard had stopped Edward, who was pulling 3 coaches.
Oh, hello, James. Shall I help you?
"No, thank you, Edward. I'll pull them myself."
Good. Don't let them beat you.
So James got ready. "Right." And off he went. "I can do it, I can do it. Shh, 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 shh. I can do it, I can do it. Shh, 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 shh. I can do it, I can do it. Shh, 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 shh. Edward whistled after him.
You're doing well, James. You're doing fine.
And James struggled up the hill with clouds of smoke and steam pouring from his funnel. "I've done it! Shh! I've done it! Shh! I've done it! Shh! I've done it! Shh! 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 Shh!" And James disappeared over the top. They reached their station safely, and James was resting in the yard when Edward went by.
Well done, James. Well done.
Then James saw, walking towards him across the rails, the fat controller. "Oh dear, what will he say? What will he say?" But the fat controller was smiling.
I was in Edward's train and saw everything. You've made the most troublesome trucks on the line behave. After that, you deserve to keep your red coat. Well done, James.
James and the Express. Sometimes Gordon and Henry slept in James's shed, and sometimes they talked of nothing but bootlaces. James tried to talk about engines who got shut up in tunnels and stuck on hills, but they wouldn't listen and went on talking and laughing. Gordon would say,
You talk too much, little James. Now, a fine strong engine like me is something to talk about. I'm the only engine who can pull the express. When I'm not there, they need 2 engines. Think of that. I've pulled expresses for years and years, and never once lost my way. I seem to know the right line by instinct.
Now, every wise engine knows, of course, that it's the signalman who works the points to make engines run on the right lines, but Gordon was so proud that he'd forgotten. One morning he said,
Wake up, James. It's nearly time for the express. What are you doing? Odd jobs? Oh, well, we all have to begin somewhere, don't we? Now run along and get my coaches, and don't be late now.
James brought Gordon's coaches to the station, and Gordon backed onto the train. He was showing off like anything.
Make way there. Make way.
The fat controller was on the train with other important people. The guard blew his whistle, and Gordon started.
Look at me now. Look at me now. Goodbye, little James. See you tomorrow. Look at me now.
And the coaches glided after him out of the station. James watched the train disappear around the curve. Oh dear, I wish I could pull the express. And then he went back to work. He brought some more coaches to the platform and was just being uncoupled when he heard a mournful, quiet and there was Gordon trying to sidle into the station without being noticed. "Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow already, then?" Gordon didn't answer. He just let off steam feebly. "Well, did you lose your way, Gordon?"
No, I didn't. It was lost for me. I was switched off the main line onto the loop, and I had to go all around and back again.
Perhaps it was instinct, Gordon,
Oh!
Meanwhile, all the passengers hurried to the booking office. "Look here, we want our money back."
Yes, we want our money back.
"Yes, money back."
Money back.
Everyone was making such a noise that the fat controller climbed onto a trolley and blew the guard's whistle.
Now, wait a moment, please. Wait a moment. Now, I promise you a new train if you'll all just keep quiet. Now, Gordon here can't do it, but perhaps James will pull it for us. James?
"Oh, yes, sir. I'll try." So James was coupled on, and everyone got in again.
Do your best, James.
"I will, sir." And off went James. Stations and bridges flashed by. The passengers leaned out of the windows and cheered, and soon they reached the terminus. Everyone said, "Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Thank you, James." And the fat controller said,
Well done, James. Would you like to pull the express sometimes?
"Oh, yes, please." Next day, when James came by, Gordon was pushing trucks in the yard.
Oh, hello, James. I like a bit of quiet work for a change, you know. I'm teaching these trucks manners. You did well with those coaches, I hear. Good. We'll show 'em.
And he gave his trucks a bump, and they went, oh, 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 oh. James and Gordon are now good friends. James sometimes takes the express to give Gordon a rest. Gordon never talks about bootlaces, and James never talks about getting stuck on hills, but they both often talk about trucks, and what fun it is making them go, oh, 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 boom. Thomas and the Guard. Thomas the Tank Engine is very proud of his branch line. He thinks it's the most important part of the whole railway. He has 2 coaches. They're old and need new paint, but he loves them very much. He calls them Annie and Clarabelle. Annie can only take passengers, but Clarabelle can take passengers, luggage, and the guard. As they run backwards and forwards along the line, Thomas sings them little songs, and Annie and Clarabelle sing too. When Thomas starts from the station, he sings, shh, 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 oh, come along, shh, 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 we're rather late, shh, shh, oh, come along, shh, shh, we're rather late, shh, shh, oh, come along, shh, shh, we're rather late, shh, shh, oh, come along, shh, shh. And the coaches sing, we're coming along, we're coming along, we're coming along, we're coming along. They don't mind what Thomas says to them, because they know that he's trying to please the fat controller. And they know, too, that if Thomas is cross, he's not cross with them. He's cross with the engines on the main line who've made him late. One day, they had to wait for Henry's train. It was late. Thomas was getting crosser and crosser. How can I run my line properly if Henry's always late? He doesn't realize that the fat controller depends on me. And he whistled very impatiently. At last, Henry came along, and Thomas said, where have you been, lazy bones?
Oh, don't be cross, Thomas, please. My system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer.
Oh, rubbish! You're too fat. You need exercise. Lots of people with piles of luggage got out of Henry's train, and they all climbed into Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas had to wait until they were ready. At last, the guard blew his whistle. And Thomas started off at once. The guard turned round to jump into his van, tripped over an old lady's umbrella, and fell flat on his face. By the time he'd picked himself up, Thomas, Annie, and Clarabelle were steaming out of the station. Thomas was in a hurry to get away. Shh, 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 shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh, shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh. But Clarabelle didn't want to come along.
No. I've lost my nice guard. No. I've lost my nice guard.
Annie tried to tell Thomas, we haven't a guard. We haven't a guard. We haven't a guard. But Thomas was hurrying. He wouldn't listen, and on he puffed. Shh, shh, shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh. Oh, come along. Shh, shh. Oh, come along. Annie and Clarabelle tried to put on their brakes, but they couldn't without the guard, and they kept crying out,
where is our guard? Where is our guard?
where is our guard? Oh, where is our guard?
Thomas, please stop.
Thomas, please stop. Thomas, please stop. Thomas, please stop. But Thomas didn't stop until they came to a signal. And the signal said, "Stop." Thomas was very cross, and he said to his driver, "Oh, bother that signal. What's the matter?" And Thomas's driver said, "Well, I don't know. The guard will tell us in a minute, Thomas." They waited and waited, but the guard didn't come. Thomas got even crosser. "Where is the guard?" Annie and Clarabelle knew, and they were crying, "We've left him behind. We've left him behind." "Yes, we left him behind. We left him behind." The driver, the fireman, and the passengers looked, and there was the guard running as fast as he could along the line with his flags in one hand and his whistle in the other. Everybody cheered him. He was very hot, so he sat down and had a drink and told them all about it. Thomas was very sorry. I'm very sorry, Mr. Guard." "Oh, it wasn't your fault, Thomas. It was an old lady's umbrella. Look, the signal's down. Let's make up for lost time. Come on." Annie and Clarabelle were so pleased to have their guard again that they sang to Thomas, "As fast as you like, as fast as you like." "Yes, as fast as you like, as fast as you like." And Thomas went as fast as he could. And they reached the end of the line quicker than ever before. Thomas goes fishing. Thomas's branch line has a station by a river. As he rumbles over the bridge, he often sees people fishing. Sometimes they stand quietly by their lines. Sometimes they actually jerk fish out of the water. Thomas often wanted to stay and watch, but his driver said, "No, Thomas. What would the fat controller say if we were late? Thomas thought it would be lovely to stop by the river. "I should like to go fishing." Every time he met another engine, he would say, "I should like to go fishing." They all answered, "Ha! Engines don't go fishing, sure." But that made Thomas impatient, and he would say, "Ha! Silly stick in the muds." Thomas generally had to take in water at the station by the river. One day he stopped as usual, and his fireman put the pipe from the water tower into his tank. Then he turned the tap on, but it was out of order and no water came. Thomas said to his driver, "Oh, bother! Oh, bother! Oh, I am thirsty." "Oh, never mind, Thomas. We'll get some water from the river." They found a bucket and some rope and went to the bridge. Then the driver let the bucket down to the water. The bucket was old and had 5 holes in it, so they had to fill it, pull it up, and empty it into Thomas's tank as quickly as they could. Thomas's fireman sang, "There's a hole in my bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza." But the driver said, "Never mind about Liza. You empty that bucket before you spill the water over me. Go on." At last they finished, and Thomas started off. "Shh, shh, that's good. Shh, 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 shh." And Annie and Clarabelle ran happily behind. "That's very much better. That's very much better. That's very much better. That's very much better." They puffed along the valley and were in the tunnel when Thomas began to feel a pain in his boiler.
while steam hissed from his safety valve in an alarming way. Thomas's driver said, "Oh, there's too much steam." And the fireman opened the tap in the feed pipe to let more water into the boiler, but none came. Thomas groaned. Oh dear, I'm going to burst. I'm going to burst. They damped down his fire and struggled on, but Thomas was in a terrible state. "I've got such a pain. I've got such a pain." Just outside the last station, they stopped, uncoupled Annie and Clarabel, and ran Thomas, who was still hissing fit to burst, onto a siding right out of the way. Then, while the guard telephoned for an engine inspector and the fireman was putting out the fire, the driver wrote notices in large letters, which he hung on Thomas in front and behind. "Danger. Keep away." Soon the inspector and the fat controller arrived.
"Oh, cheer up, Thomas. We'll soon put you right. Yes."
The driver told them what had happened, and the inspector said,
Oh, so the feed pipe is blocked, eh? Well, I'll just look in the tanks."
He climbed up and peered in. Then he came down and said to the fat controller,
Excuse me, sir, but look in the tank, will you, and tell me what you can see?" "Oh, yes, certainly, Inspector. Certainly."
He clambered up, looked in, and nearly fell off in surprise.
Well, I never, Inspector. Can you see fish? Goodness gracious me. How did the fish get in there, driver?
Thomas's driver scratched his head. "We must have fished them from the river." And he told them about the bucket. The fat controller laughed.
Well, Thomas, oh dear, so you and your driver have been fishing, eh? But fish don't suit you, do they? No, we must get them out.
So the driver and the fireman fetched rods and nets, and they all took turns at fishing in Thomas's tank. When they'd caught all the fish, the station master gave them some potatoes. The driver borrowed a frying pan, while the fireman made a fire beside the line and did the cooking. Then they all had a lovely picnic supper of fish and chips. The fat controller finished first.
Yes. That was good. Very good indeed. But fish don't suit you, Thomas, do they? So you mustn't do it again.
And Thomas said, "No, sir, I won't. Engines don't go fishing. It's too uncomfortable." Thomas, Terence, and the Snow. Autumn was changing the leaves from green to brown. The fields were changing too, from yellow stubble to brown earth. As Thomas puffed along, he heard a tractor at work. One day, stopping for a signal, he saw the tractor close by. The tractor looked over the fence at Thomas and said,
"Hello, I'm Terence. I'm plowing."
"I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train." "Oh, what ugly wheels you've got."
"They're not ugly. They're caterpillar tracks. I can go anywhere with my tracks. I don't need rails.
I don't want to go anywhere. I like my rails, thank you. And off went Thomas. Winter came, and with it dark heavy clouds full of snow. Thomas's driver said, I don't like it. A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us. But Thomas saw that the snow was melting on the rails, and he said, Oh, this is soft stuff. There's nothing to it. And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but the country was covered, and the rails were two dark lines standing out in the white snow. The driver said, You'll need your snowplough for the next journey, Thomas. Yes.
Snowplough? Oh, snowplough? Oh, snow is silly soft stuff. It won't stop me.
Now, just you listen to me, young Thomas. We are going to fix your snowplough on, and I want no nonsense, please. The snowplough was heavy and uncomfortable, and made Thomas cross. He shook it and he banged it, and when they got back it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. You're a very naughty engine, Thomas. And he shut the shed door for the night. Next morning, both driver and fireman came early and worked hard to mend the snowplough, but they couldn't make it fit properly. It was time for the first train. Thomas was pleased.
I shan't have to wear it. I shan't have to wear it. I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't need it today. Snow can't stop me.
And he rushed off into the tunnel, thinking how clever he was. At the other end, he saw a heap of snow fallen from the sides of the cutting.
Ha ha ha! Silly old snow! Silly old snow! Look out! I'm coming! I'm coming! Ooh! 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 Oh! Cinders and ashes! I'm stuck!
And he was. The driver said, Back, Thomas! Back! Thomas tried, but his wheels spun and he couldn't move. More snow fell and piled up around him. The guard went back for help, while the driver, fireman, and passengers tried to dig the snow away. But as fast as they dug, more snow slipped down, until Thomas was nearly buried. Thomas was very upset.
Oh, my wheel and coupling rods! Oh, I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. Oh, what a silly little engine I am.
And Thomas began to cry. And a bus came and took all his passengers away, and Thomas felt very lonely and very sad when he heard a noise in the tunnel. Yes, it was Terence, and he came chugging out of the tunnel.
Hello, Thomas. No, don't worry. I'll soon get you out.
He pulled the empty coaches away and came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun helplessly when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and slipped and tugged. last, he dragged Thomas into the tunnel. Thomas was very grateful.
Thank you, Terence. Thank you. Your caterpillar tracks are really splendid.
Ha ha! They can take me anywhere, Thomas. And Thomas's driver said, I hope you'll be sensible now, Thomas.
I'll try to be. I'll try to be.
And Thomas puffed off home. Thomas and Bertie. One day, Thomas was waiting at the junction when a bus came into the yard. Thomas said to the bus,
Hello, who are you?
What's that? Oh, I'm Bertie. Who are you?
I'm Thomas. I run this line.
Oh, so you're Thomas, are you? Oh, yes. I remember now. You was stuck in the snow, didn't you? I took your passengers and Terence pulled you out, didn't he? Well, I've come to help you with your passengers today. This made Thomas very cross indeed, and he let off steam.
Help me! Help me! Oh, wow! I can go faster than you.
You can't.
I can.
You can't.
I can.
All right, I'll race you. The drivers agreed. The station master said, Right, are you ready? Steady. Go! And they were off. Thomas never could go fast at first, and Bertie drew in front. Thomas was running well, but he didn't hurry. Annie and Clarabel were rather anxious.
Why don't you go fast? Why don't you go fast?
Why don't you go fast? Why don't you go fast?
But Thomas said,
Shh, 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 shh. Wait and see. Wait and see. Shh, shh, shh. Wait and see. Shh, shh, shh. Wait and see.
He's a long way ahead. He's a long way ahead.
He's a long way ahead. He's a long way ahead.
But Thomas didn't mind. He remembered the level crossing. There was Bertie fuming at the gates while they sailed gaily through.
Ha ha! Goodbye, Bertie!
The road left the railway and went through a village, so they couldn't see Bertie. They stopped at the station, and Thomas called out,
Quickly, please! Quickly, please!
Everybody got out quickly, and the guard whistled, and off they went. Thomas sang,
Come along, shh, shh, come along, shh, shh, come along, shh, shh, come along, shh, shh.
And Annie and Clarabel sang,
We're coming along, we're coming along.
We're coming along, we're coming along. Hurry, 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 shh, 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 shh. Hurry, 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 shh, 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 shh. Hurry, hurry.
Oh! For there, straight ahead, was Bertie crossing the bridge over the railway, and he was tooting triumphantly on his horn. Ah, 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 ah. Thomas groaned.
Oh, bother! Oh, bother!
Annie and Clarabel wailed.
He's a long way in front, a long way in front.
He's a long way in front, a long way in front.
But Thomas's driver said, Now steady, Thomas. We'll beat Bertie yet.
We'll beat Bertie yet. We'll beat Bertie yet.
We'll beat Bertie yet. We'll beat Bertie yet. We'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it. Shh, 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 shh. We'll do it, we'll do it. Oh, bother, there's a station.
And as he stopped, he heard something go, ah, 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 ah. Goodbye, Thomas. You must be very tired. Sorry I can't stop. We buses have to work, you know. Ta-ra. The next station was by the river. They got there quickly, but the signal was up. Thomas thought,
Oh dear, we've lost now.
but he felt better after a drink. Then James rattled through with the goods train, and the signal dropped, showing that the line was clear. "Hurrah! We're off! Hurrah! We're off!" And as they rumbled over the bridge, they heard a very impatient "ah, ah, 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 ah." And there was Bertie waiting at the red traffic lights, while cars and lorries crossed the narrow bridge in the opposite direction. But as soon as the lights turned green, Bertie was off with a roar, and soon he and Thomas were racing side by side up a valley. The passengers in the train and in the bus got very excited and started cheering and shouting. And now Thomas reached his full speed, and foot by foot, yard by yard, he gained on Bertie till they were running level. Bertie tried hard, but Thomas was too fast. Slowly but surely he drew ahead till he plunged into a tunnel, leaving Bertie toiling far behind. Thomas was very pleased. "I've done it! Yes, I've done it! I've done it! Yes, I've done it! Yes, I've done it!" So were Annie and Clarabelle. "We've done it, hooray! We've done it, hooray! We've done it, hooray! We've done it, hooray!" And on they went to the last station. The passengers gave Thomas 3 cheers and told the station master and the porters all about the race. When Bertie came in, they gave him 3 cheers too. And Bertie said, "Whew, that was well done, Thomas. That was fun. But to beat you over that hill, I should have to grow wings and be an aeroplane." Thomas and Bertie now keep each other very busy. Bertie finds people in the villages who want to go by train and takes them to Thomas, while Thomas brings people to the station for Bertie to take home. They often talk about their race, but Bertie's passengers don't like being bounced about like peas in a frying pan, and the fat controller has warned Thomas about what happens to engines who race at dangerous speeds. So although, between you and me, they'd like to have another race, I don't think they ever will.
Edward the Blue Engine was getting old. His bearings were worn, and he clanked as he puffed along. He was taking 20 empty cattle trucks to a market town. The sun shone, the birds sang, and some cows grazed in a field by the line. "Come on, come on, come on," puffed Edward. "Oh, oh, 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 oh," screamed the trucks. Edward puffed and clanked. The trucks rattled and screamed. The cows were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. They twitched up their tails and ran. They galloped across the field, broke through the fence, and charged the train between the 13th and 14th trucks. The coupling broke, and the last 7 trucks left the rails. They were not damaged, and stayed upright. They ran for a short way along the sleepers before stopping. Edward felt a jerk, but didn't take much notice. He was used to trucks. "Bother those trucks," he thought. "Why can't they come quietly?" He ran on to the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and laughed. "Fancy allowing cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show 'em," they boasted. Edward pretended not to mind, but Toby was cross. "You couldn't help it, Edward," he said. "They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are." Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. Poop, poop, he whistled. Mind the cows. Ha, 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 he chortled, panting up the hill. Hurry, 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 puffed Gordon. Don't make such a fuss, don't make such a fuss, grumbled his coaches. They rumbled over the viaduct and roared through the next station. A long, straight stretch of line lay ahead. In the distance was a bridge. It had high parapets each side. It seemed to Gordon that there was something on the bridge. His driver thought so too. Whoa, Gordon, he said, and shut off steam. Pooh, said Gordon. It's only a cow. Shoo, shoo, he hissed, moving slowly onto the bridge. But the cow wouldn't shoo. She had lost her calf and felt lonely. Moo, she said sadly, walking towards him. Gordon stopped. His driver, fireman, and some passengers tried to send her away, but she wouldn't go, so they gave it up. Presently Henry arrived with a train from the other direction. What's this? He said grandly. A cow. I'll soon settle her. Be off, he hissed. But the cow turned and mooed at him. Henry backed away. I don't want to hurt her, he said. Drivers, firemen and passengers again tried to move the cow, but failed. Henry's guard went back and put detonators on the line to protect his train. At the nearest station he told them about the cow. Oh, that must be Bluebell, said a porter thoughtfully. Her calf is here, ready to go to market. We'll take it along. So they unloaded the calf and took it to the bridge. Moo, moo, wailed the calf. Moo, moo, bellowed Bluebell. She nuzzled her calf happily, and the porter led them away. The two trains started. Not a word, keep it dark, whispered Gordon and Henry as they passed. But the story soon spread. Well, 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 chuckled Edward. Two big engines, afraid of one cow. Afraid? Rubbish, said Gordon huffily. We didn't want the poor thing to hurt herself by running against us. We stopped so as not to excite her. You see what I mean, my dear Edward? Yes, Gordon, said Edward gravely. Gordon felt somehow that Edward saw only too well. Bertie's Chase. Beep, beep, we're late, fussed Edward. Beep, 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 beep. Where is Thomas? He doesn't usually make us wait. Oh dear, what can the matter be, sang the fireman. Johnny's so long that... Never you mind about Johnny, laughed the driver. Just you climb on the cab and look for Thomas. Can you see him? No. The guard looked at his watch. 10 minutes late, he said to the driver. We can't wait here all day. Look again, Sid, said the driver, just in case. The fireman got to his feet. Can you see him? No, he answered. There's Bertie Bus in a tearing hurry. No need to bother with him, no. Likely he's on a coach tour or something. He clambered down. Right away, Charlie, said the guard, and Edward puffed off. Toot, toot, stop, stop, wailed Bertie, roaring into the yard. But it was no good. Edward's last coach had disappeared into the tunnel. Bother, said Bertie. Bother Thomas's fireman not coming to work today. Oh, why did I promise to help the passengers catch the train? That will do, Bertie, said his driver. A promise is a promise, and we must keep it. I'll catch Edward or bust, said Bertie grimly, as he raced along the road. Oh, my gears and axles, he groaned, toiling up the hill. I'll never be the same bus again. Toot, toot, I see him. Hooray, hooray, he cheered as he reached the top of the hill. He's reached the station, Bertie groaned the next minute. No! He's stopped by a signal. Hooray! Hooray! And he tore down the hill, his brakes squealing at the corners. His passengers bounced like balls in a bucket. Well done, Bertie, they shouted. Go it! Go it! Hens and dogs scattered in all directions as he raced through the village. Wait! Wait! He tooted, skidding into the yard. He was just in time to see the signal drop, the guard wave his flag, and Edward puff out of the station. His passengers rushed to the platform, but it was no good, and they came bustling back. I'm sorry, said Bertie unhappily. Never mind, Bertie, they said. After him, quickly. Third time lucky, you know. Do you think they'll catch him at the next station, driver? There's a good chance, he answered. Our road keeps close to the line, and we can climb hills better than Edward. He thought for a minute. I'll just make sure. He then spoke to the station master, while the passengers waited impatiently in the bus. This hill is too steep, this hill is too steep, grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Beep, beep, whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. The porters and people hurried, and Edward impatiently waited to start. Beep, whistled the guard, and Edward's driver looked back. But the flag didn't wave. There was a distant toot, and the station master, running across, snatched the green flag out of the guard's hand. Then everything seemed to happen at once. Toot, 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 bellowed Bertie. His passengers poured onto the platform and scrambled into the train. The station master told the guard and driver what had happened, and Edward listened. Ooh, I'm sorry about the chase, Bertie, he said. My fault, panted Bertie. Late at junction. You didn't know about Thomas's passengers. Beep, beep. Goodbye, Bertie. We're off, whistled Edward. 3 cheers for Bertie, called the passengers. They cheered and waved till they were out of sight. Saved from scrap. There is a scrapyard near Edward Station. It is full of rusty old cars and machinery. They are brought there to be broken up. The pieces are loaded into trucks, and Edward pulls them to the steelworks, where they are melted down and used again. One day, Edward saw a traction engine in the yard. Hello, he said. You're not broken and rusty. Well, what are you doing there? I'm Trevor, said the traction engine sadly. They're going to break me up next week. What a shame, said Edward. My driver says I only need some paint, brasso and oil to be as good as new, Trevor went on sadly. But it's no good. My master doesn't want me. I suppose it's because I'm old-fashioned. Edward snorted indignantly. People say I'm old-fashioned, but I don't care. The fat controller says I'm a useful engine. My driver says I'm useful too, replied Trevor. I sometimes feel ill, but I don't give up like these tractors. I struggle on and finish the job. I've never broken down in my life, he ended proudly. What work did you do? Asked Edward kindly. My master would send us from farm to farm. We threshed the corn, hauled logs, sawed timber, and did lots of other work. We made friends at all the farms, and saw them every year. The children loved to see us come. They followed us in crowds, and watched us all day long. my driver would sometimes give them rides. Trevor shut his eyes, remembering. I like children, he said simply. Oh, yes, I like children. Broken up, what a shame, broken up, what a shame, clanked Edward as he went back to work. I must help Trevor, I must. He thought of the people he knew who liked engines. Edward had lots of friends, but strangely none of them had room for a traction engine at home. It's a shame, it's a shame, he hissed as he brought his coaches to the station. Then, peep, peep, he whistled. Why didn't I think of him before? Waiting there on the platform was the very person. Morning, Charlie. Morning, Sid. Hello, Edward, you look upset. What's the matter, Charlie? He asked the driver. There's a traction engine in the scrapyard, Vicar. He'll be broken up next week, and it's a shame. Jem Cole says he never drove a better engine. Do save him, sir. You've got room, sir. Yes, Edward, I've got room, laughed the Vicar. But I don't need a traction engine. He'll saw wood and give children rides. Do buy him, sir, please. We'll see, said the Vicar, and climbed into the train. Jem Cole came on Saturday afternoon. The Reverend's coming to see you, Trevor. Maybe he'll buy you. Do you think he will? Asked Trevor hopefully. He will when I've lit your fire and cleaned you up, said Jem. When the Vicar and his two boys arrived in the evening, Trevor was blowing off steam. He hadn't felt so happy for months. What's this, Reverence? Called Jem. And Trevor chuffered happily about the yard. Oh, Daddy, do buy him, pleaded the boys, jumping up and down in their excitement. Now I'll try. And the Vicar climbed up beside Jem. Show your paces, Trevor, he said, and drove him about the yard. Then he went into the office and came out smiling. I've got him cheap, Jem, cheap. Do you hear that, Trevor? Cried Jem. The Reverend saved you, and you'll live at the vicarage now. Boop, boop, whistled Trevor happily. Will you drive him home for me, Jem, and take these scallywags with you? They won't want to come in the car when there's a traction engine to ride on. Trevor's home in the vicarage orchard is close to the railway, and he sees Edward every day. His paint is spotless, and his brass shines like gold. He saws firewood in winter, and Jem sometimes borrows him when a tractor fails. Trevor likes doing his old jobs, but his happiest day is the church fete. Then, with a long wooden seat bolted to his bunker, he chuffers round the orchard, giving rides to children. Long afterwards you will see him shut his eyes, remembering, I like children, he whispers happily. Hold on. One day, James had to wait at Edward's station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Late again, he shouted. Edward only laughed, and James fumed away. Edward is impossible, he grumbled to the others. He clacks about like a lot of old iron, and he is so slow he makes us wait. Thomas and Percy were indignant. Old iron? They snorted. Slow? Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really? Said James huffily. I should like to see him do it. One day, James's driver did not feel well when he came to work. I'll manage, he said, but when they reached the top of Gordon's Hill, he could hardly stand. The fireman drove the train to the next station. He spoke to the signalman, put the trucks in a siding, and uncoupled James ready for shunting. Then he helped the driver over to the station and asked them to look after him and find a relief. Suddenly the signalman shouted, and the fireman turned round and saw James puffing away. He ran hard, but he couldn't catch James, and soon came back to the signal box. The signalman was busy. "All traffic halted," he announced at last. "Up and down main lines are clear for 30 miles, and the inspector's coming." The fireman mopped his face. "What happened?" he asked. "Two boys on the footplate. They tumbled off when James started. I shouted at them and they ran like rabbits." "Just let me catch them," said the fireman grimly. "I'll teach them to meddle with my engine." Both men jumped as the telephone rang. "Yes," answered the signalman. "He's here." "Right, I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once in Edward. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope." "What for?" wondered the fireman. "Search me, but you'd better get 'em quickly." The fireman was ready and waiting when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and rope. "Good man," he said. "Jump in." "We'll catch him. We'll catch him," puffed Edward, crossing to the up line in pursuit. James was laughing as he left the yard. "What a lark! What a lark!" he chuckled to himself. Presently, he missed his driver's hand on the regulator, and then he realized there was no one in his cab. "What shall I do?" he wailed. "I can't stop! Help! Help! We're coming! We're coming!" Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. With a great effort, he caught up and crept alongside, slowly gaining till his smoke box was level with James' buffer beam. "Steady, Edward!" The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James' buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. He tried again and again. More than once he nearly fell, but just saved himself. At last, "Got him!" he shouted. He pulled the noose tight and came back to the cab safely. Gently braking, so as not to snap the rope, Edward's driver checked the engine speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. The engines puffed back side by side. "So, the old iron caught you after all," chuckled Edward. "I'm sorry," whispered James. "Thank you for saving me." "That's all right. You were splendid, Edward." The fat controller was waiting and thanking the men warmly. "A fine piece of work," he said. "James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Edward happily. "It'll be lovely not to clank." The two naughty boys were soon caught by the police, and their fathers walloped them soundly. They were also forbidden to watch trains till they could be trusted. James's driver soon got well in hospital and is now back at work. James missed him very much, but he missed Edward more. And you'll be glad to know that when Edward came home the other day, James and all the other engines gave him a tremendous welcome. The fat controller thinks he'll be deaf for weeks.
Skarloey Remembers. The fat controller had sent Edward to the works to be mended. Near the works station, Edward noticed a narrow-gauge engine standing in an open-sided shed. "That's Skarloey," he thought. "What's he doing there?" He remembered Skarloey and his brother Renius, because in the old days he had often brought passengers who wanted to travel up to the lake in their little train. As the men at the works could not mend him at once, Edward asked them to put him on a siding close to Skarloey. Skarloey was pleased to see Edward. "The owner has just bought 2 more engines," he said. "He told me I was a very old engine and deserved a good rest. He gave me this shed so that I could see everything and not be lonely. But I am lonely all the same," he continued sadly. "I miss Renius very much. Yesterday one of the new engines pushed him on a truck, and now he's gone to be mended. I wish I could be mended too, and pull coaches again." "Have your coaches got names?" asked Edward. "Oh, yes. There's Agnes, Ruth, Jemima, Lucy and Beatrice. Agnes is proud. She has cushions for first-class passengers. She pities Ruth, Jemima and Lucy, who are third class with bare boards. But they all 4 sniff at Beatrice. Beatrice often smells of fish and cheese, but she is most important," said Skarloey earnestly. "She has a little window through which the guard sells tickets. I sometimes leave the others behind, but I always take Beatrice. You must have tickets, and a guard, you know." "Of course," said Edward gravely. "Renius and I," continued Skarloey, "used to take turns at pulling the trains. We know everybody, and everybody knows us. We whistle to the people in the fields, at level crossings, and in lonely cottages and farms, and the people always wave to us. We love passing the school playgrounds at break time, and then the children will always run over to the fence to watch us go by. The passengers always wave, because they think the children are waving to them. But we engines know better, of course," said Skarloey importantly. "Yes, we do indeed," agreed Edward. "We take your tourists to the lake, and then get ready to pull the train back. We enjoy the morning journey home, because then our friends from the villages come down to do their shopping. We whistle before every station, 'Peep, peep, look out!' and the people are there ready. 'Where's Mrs. Last?' asks the guard. 'She's coming!' 'Peep, peep,' we whistle, and Mrs. Last comes running onto the platform. 'We'll leave you behind one of these days, Mrs.,' laughs our driver, but we know he never will. We stop elsewhere too, at farm crossings and stiles, where paths lead to lonely houses. Renius and I know all the places very well indeed, and our driver used to say that we would stop even if he didn't put on the brakes. Sometimes on market day, Ruth, Jemima and Lucy were so full of people that the guard would allow third-class passengers to travel in Agnes. She didn't like that at all, and would grumble, 'First-class coach, third-class people.' That made me cross. 'Shut up,' I'd say, 'or I'll bump you.' That soon stopped her rudeness to my friends. Just then some workmen came. 'We're going to mend you now, Edward,' they said. 'Come along.' Well, goodbye, Skarloey. Thank you for telling me about your railway. It's a lovely little line." "It is, it is. Thank you for talking to me, Edward. You've cheered me up. Goodbye." Skarloey watched Edward being taken back to the works. Then, shutting his eyes, he dozed in the warm afternoon sun. He smiled as he dozed, for he was dreaming, as old engines will, of happy days in the past. Sir Handel. The new engines looked very smart. One was called Sir Handel, and the other Peter Sam. "What a small shed," grumbled Sir Handel. "This won't do at all." "I think it's nice," said Peter Sam. "Huh!" grunted Sir Handel. "What's that rubbish?" "Shush, shush," said Peter Sam. "That's Skarloey, the famous old engine. I'm sorry, Skarloey," he whispered. "Sir Handel's upset now, but he's quite nice, really." Skarloey felt sorry for Peter Sam. "No, Sir Handel, said the farmer next morning. "We'll get you ready." "I'm tired," he yawned. "Let Peter Sam go. He'd love it." "No," said the fireman. "Owner's orders, you're first." "Oh, well," said Sir Handel sulkily. "I suppose I must." When his driver arrived, Sir Handel puffed away to fetch the coaches. "Whatever next?" he snorted. "Those aren't coaches. They're cattle trucks." "Oh!" screamed Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jemima, and Beatrice. "What a horrid engine!" "It's not what I'm used to," clanked Sir Handel rebelliously, making for the station. He rolled to the platform just as Gordon arrived. "Hello," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm Gordon. Who are you?" "I'm Sir Handel. Yes, I've heard of you. You're an express engine, I believe." "So am I, but I'm used to bogie coaches, not these cattle trucks." "Do you have bogie coaches?" "Oh, yes, I see you do. We must have a chat sometime. Sorry I can't stop. Must keep time, you know." And he puffed off, leaving Gordon at a loss for words. Come along, he puffed. Cattle trucks, grumbled the coaches. "We'll pay him out, we'll pay him out." Presently they stopped at the station. The line curved here and began to climb. It was not very steep, but the day was misty and the rails were slippery. "Hold back," whispered Agnes to Ruth. "Hold back," whispered Ruth to Jemima. "Hold back," whispered Jemima to Lucy. "Hold back," whispered Lucy to Beatrice. And they giggled as the handle started and their couplings tightened. "Come on! Come on!" he puffed as his wheels slipped on the greasy rails. "Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on!" His wheels were spinning, but the coaches pulled him back, and the train stopped on the hill beyond the station. "I can't do it! I can't do it!" he grumbled. "I'm used to sensible bogie coaches, not these bumpy cattle trucks." The guard came up. "I think the coaches are up to something," he told the driver. So they decided to bring the train down again to a level piece of line, to give Sir Handel a good start. The guard helped the fireman put sand on the rails, and Sir Handel made a tremendous effort. The coaches tried hard to drag him back, but he puffed and pulled so hard that they were soon over the top and away on their journey. The thin controller was severe with Sir Handel that night. "You are a troublesome engine," he said. "You are rude, conceited, and much too big for your wheels. Next time I shall punish you severely." Sir Handel was impressed, and behaved well for several days. Then, one morning, he took the train to the top station. He was cross. It was Peter Sam's turn, but the thin controller had made him go instead. "We'll leave the coaches," said his driver, "and fetch some trucks from the quarry." "Trucks!" snorted Sir Handel. "Trucks!" "Yes," his driver repeated. "Trucks." Sir Handel jerked forward. "I won't," he muttered. "So there." He lurched, bumped, and stopped. His driver and fireman got out. "Told you," said Sir Handel triumphantly. He had pushed the rails apart and settled down between them. They telephoned the thin controller. He came up at once with Peter Sam, and brought some workmen in a truck. Then he and the fireman took Peter Sam home with the coaches, while the driver and workmen put Sir Handel back on the rails. Sir Handel did not feel so pleased with himself when he crawled home, and found the thin controller waiting for him. "You are a very naughty engine," he said sternly. "You will stay in the shed till I can trust you to behave." Peter Sam and the Refreshment Lady. As Sir Handel was shut up, Peter Sam had to run the line. He was excited, and the fireman found it hard to get him ready. "Sober up, can't you?" he growled. "Anybody would think," said Sir Handel rudely, "that he wanted to work." "All respectable engines do," said Skarloey firmly. "I wish I could work myself." "Keep calm, Peter Sam. Don't get excited, and you'll do very well." But Peter Sam was in such a state that he couldn't listen. When his driver came, Peter Sam ran along to fetch the coaches. "Beep, beep, 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 come along, girls," he whistled, and although he was so excited, he remembered to be careful. "That's the way, my dears. Gently does it." "What did he say?" asked Jemima, who was deaf. "He said, 'Come along, girls,' and he called us his dears," simpered the other coaches. "Really, one does not know what to think. Such a handsome young engine, too. So nice and well-mannered." And they tittered happily together as they followed Peter Sam. Peter Sam fussed into the station to find Henry already there. "This won't do, youngster," said Henry. "I can't be kept waiting. If you are late tonight, I'll go off and leave your passengers behind." "Pooh," said Peter Sam. But secretly he was a little worried. But he couldn't feel worried for long. What fun it all is, he thought as he ran around his train. He let off steam happily, while he waited for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag. Peter Sam puffed happily away, singing a little song. "I'm Peter Sam, I'm running this line, I'm Peter Sam, I'm running this line." The people waved as he passed the farms and cottages, and he gave a loud whistle at the school. The children all ran to see him puffing by. Agnes, Ruth, Jemima, Lucy, and Beatrice enjoyed themselves too. "He's cocky, trot, trot, but he's nice, trot, trot. He's cocky, trot, trot, but he's nice, trot, trot," they sang as they trundled along. They were growing very fond of Peter Sam. Every afternoon they had to wait an hour at the station by the lake. The driver, fireman, and the guard usually bought something from the refreshment lady, and went and sat in Beatrice. The refreshment lady always came home on this train. Time passed slowly today for Peter Sam. At last his driver and fireman came. "Beep, beep! Hurry up, please!" he whistled to the passengers, and they came strolling back to the station. Peter Sam was sizzling with impatience. How awful, he thought, if we miss Henry's train! The last passengers arrived. The guard was ready with his flag and whistle. The refreshment lady walked across the platform. Then it happened. The guard says that Peter Sam was too impatient. Peter Sam says he was sure he heard a whistle. Anyway, he started. "Come quickly! Come quickly!" he puffed. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" wailed the coaches. "You've left her behind! You've left her behind!" The guard whistled and waved his red flag. The driver, looking back, saw the refreshment lady shouting and running after the train. "Bother!" groaned Peter Sam as he stopped. "We'll miss Henry now." The refreshment lady climbed into Beatrice, and they started again. Oh, we're sure to be late! Oh, we're sure to be late!" panted Peter Sam frantically. His driver had to keep checking him. "Steady, old boy, steady!" "Beep, beep!" Peter Sam whistled at the stations. "Hurry, please, hurry!" And they reached the big station just as Henry steamed in. "Hurrah!" said Peter Sam. "We've caught him after all." And he let off steam with relief. Whoosh! "Not bad, youngster," said Henry loftily. The refreshment lady shook her fist at Peter Sam. "What do you mean by leaving me behind?" she demanded. "I'm sorry, refreshment lady, but I was worried about our passengers." And he told her what Henry had said. The refreshment lady laughed. "Oh, you silly engine," she said. "Henry Henry wouldn't dare go. He's got to wait. It's a guaranteed connection. Well, said Peter Sam. Well, where's that Henry? But Peter Sam was too late that time, for Henry had trottled away. Old Faithful. Sir Handel stayed shut up for several days, but one market day Peter Sam could not work. He needed repairs. Sir Handel was glad to come out. He tried to be kind, but the coaches didn't trust him. They were awkward and rude. He even sang them little songs, but it was no use. It was most unfortunate, too, that Sir Handel had to check suddenly to avoid running over a sheep. "He's bumped us!" screamed the coaches. "Let's pay him out!" The coaches knew that all engines must go carefully at a place near the big station, but they were so cross with Sir Handel that they didn't care what they did. They surged into Sir Handel, making him lurch off the line. Luckily no one was hurt. Sir Handel limped to the shed. The thin controller inspected the damage. "No more work for you today," he said. "Bother those coaches. We must take the village people home and fetch the tourists, all without an engine." "What about me, sir?" said a voice. "Skarloey!" he exclaimed. "Can you do it?" "I'll try," answered the old engine. The coaches stood at the platform. Skarloey advanced on them, hissing crossly. "I'm ashamed of you," he scolded. "Such behaviour! You might have hurt your passengers. On market day, too." "We're sorry, Skarloey. We didn't think. That's a Handel, he's—" "No tales," said Skarloey firmly. "I won't have it. And don't you dare try tricks on me." "No, Skarloey. Oh, of course not, Skarloey," quavered the coaches meekly. Skarloey might be old and have dirty paint, but he was certainly an engine who would stand no nonsense. His friends crowded round, and the guard had to shoo them away before they could start. Skarloey felt happy. He remembered all the gates and stiles where he had to stop, and whistled to his friends. The sun shone, the rails were dry. "This is lovely," he thought. But presently they began to climb, and he felt short of steam. "Oh, bother my tubes!" he panted. "Take your time, old boy," soothed his driver. "I'll manage. I'll manage." He wheezed, and pausing for breath at the stations, he gallantly struggled along. After a rest at the top station, Skarloey was ready to start. "It'll be better downhill," he thought. The coaches ran nicely, but he soon began to feel tired again. His springs were weak, and the rail joints jarred his wheels. Then, with a crack, the front spring broke, and he stopped. "I feel all crooked," he complained. "That's torn it," said his driver. "We'll need a bus now for our passengers." "No," pleaded Skarloey. "I'd be ashamed to have a bus take my passengers." "I'll get home or burst," he promised bravely. The thin controller looked at his watch and paced the platform. James and his train waited impatiently too. They heard a hoarse peep-pee. Then, groaning, clanging and clanking, Skarloey crept into sight. He was tilted to one side and making fearful noises, but he plodded bravely on. "I'll do it! I'll do it!" He gasped between the clanks and groans. I've done it! And he sighed thankfully as the train stopped where James was waiting. James said nothing. He waited for his passengers, and then respectfully puffed away. "You were right, sir," said Skarloey to the owner that evening. "Old engines can't pull trains like young ones." The owner smiled. "They can if they're mended, old faithful," he said. "And that's what will happen to you. You deserve it." "Oh, sir," said Skarloey happily. Sir Handel is longing for Skarloey to come back. He thinks Skarloey is the best engine in the world. He does his fair share of the work now, and the coaches never play tricks on him, because he always manages them in Skarloey's way.
Percy and the signal. Percy is a little green tank engine who works in the yard at the big station. He is a funny little engine and loves playing jokes. These jokes sometimes get him into trouble. "Peep, peep," he whistled one morning. "Hurry up, Gordon! The train's ready." Gordon thought he was late and came puffing out. "Ha ha ha!" laughed Percy and showed him a train of dirty coal trucks. Gordon didn't go back to the shed. He stayed on a siding thinking how to pay Percy out. "Stay in the shed today," squeaked Percy to James. "The Fat Controller will come and see you." James was a conceited engine. "Ah," he thought, "the Fat Controller knows I'm a fine engine, ready for anything. He wants me to pull a special train." So James stayed where he was, and nothing his driver and fireman could do would make him move. But the Fat Controller never came, and the other engines grumbled dreadfully. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last an inspector came. "Show a wheel, James," he said crossly. "You can't stay here all day." "The Fat Controller told me to stay here," answered James sulkily. "He sent a message this morning." "He did not," retorted the inspector. "How could he? He's away for a week." "Oh," said James. "Oh." He came quickly out of the shed. "Where's Percy?" Percy had wisely disappeared. When the Fat Controller came back, he did see James, and Percy too. Both engines wished he hadn't. James and Gordon wanted to pay Percy out, but Percy kept out of their way. One morning, however, he was so excited that he forgot to be careful. "I say, you engines," he bubbled, "I'm to take some trucks to Thomas's Junction. The Fat Controller chose me specially. He must know I'm a really useful engine." "More likely he wants you out of the way," grunted James. But Gordon gave James a wink. Ah, yes," said James. "Just so. You were saying, Gordon?" "James and I were just speaking about signals at the junction. We can't be too careful about signals. But then I needn't say that to a really useful engine like you, Percy." Percy felt flattered. "Oh, of course not.
he said. "We had spoken of backing signals," put in James. "They need extra special care, you know. Would you like me to explain?" "No, thank you, James," said Percy airily. "I know all about signals." And he bustled off importantly. James and Gordon solemnly exchanged winks. Percy was a little worried as he set out. "I wonder what backing signals are," he thought. "Never mind, I'll manage. I know all about signals." He puffed crossly to his trucks and felt better. He saw a signal just outside the station. "Bother," he said. "It's a danger!" "Oh, oh, 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 oh!" screamed the trucks as they bumped into each other. Presently the signal moved to show line clear. Its arm moved up instead of down. Percy had never seen that sort of signal before. He was surprised. Down means go, he thought, and up means stop. So upper still must mean go back. I know. It's one of those backing signals. How clever of me to find that out. "Come on, Percy," said his driver. "Off we go." But Percy wouldn't go forward, and his driver had to let him back in order to start at all. "I am clever," thought Percy. "Even my driver doesn't know about backing signals." And he started so suddenly that the truck screamed again. "Whoa, Percy!" called his driver. "Stop! You're going the wrong way." "But it's a backing signal," Percy protested, and told him about Gordon and James. The driver laughed and explained about signals that point up. "Oh dear," said Percy. "Let's start quickly before they come and see us." But he was too late. Gordon swept by with the express and saw everything. The big engines talked about signals that night. They thought the subject was funny. They laughed a lot. Percy thought they were being very silly. Duck takes charge. "Do you know what?" asked Percy. "What?" grunted Gordon. "Do you know what?" "Silly," said Gordon crossly. "Of course I don't know what, if you don't tell me what is." "The Fat Controller says that the work in the yard is too heavy for me. He's getting a bigger engine to help me." "Rubbish," put in James. "Any engine could do it," he went on grandly. "If you worked more and chattered less, this yard would be a sweeter, a better, and a happier place." Percy went off to fetch some coaches. "That stupid old signal," he thought. "No one listens to me now. They think I'm a silly little engine and order me about. I'll show 'em! I'll show 'em!" He puffed as he ran about the yard, but he didn't know how. Things went wrong. The coaches and trucks behaved badly, and by the end of the afternoon he felt tired and unhappy. He brought some coaches to the station and stood panting at the end of the platform. "Hello, Percy," said the Fat Controller. "You look tired." "Yes, sir. I am, sir. I don't know if I'm standing on my dome or my wheels." Oh, you look the right way up to me," laughed the Fat Controller. "Cheer up. The new engine is bigger than you and can probably do the work alone. Would you like to help build my new harbour at Thomas's Junction? Thomas and Toby will help, but I need an engine there all the time." "Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir," said Percy happily. The new engine arrived next morning, "What is your name?" asked the Fat Controller kindly. "Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague." "Good," said the Fat Controller. "Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, come and show Duck around." The two engines went off together. At first the trucks played tricks, but soon found that playing tricks on Duck was a mistake. The coaches behaved well, though James, Gordon and Henry did not. They watched Duck quietly doing his work. "He seems a simple sort of engine," they whispered. "We'll have some fun." "Quack! Quack!" they wheezed as they passed him. Percy was cross, but Duck took no notice. "I'll get tired of it soon," he said. Presently the three engines began to order Duck about. Duck stopped. "Do they tell you to do things, Percy?" he asked. "Yes, they do," answered Percy sadly. "Right," said Duck. "We'll soon stop that nonsense." He whispered something. "We'll do it tonight." The Fat Controller had had a good day. There had been no grumbling passengers. All the trains had run to time, and Duck had worked well in the yard. The Fat Controller was looking forward to hot buttered toast for tea at home. He had just left the office when he heard an extraordinary noise. "Bother!" he said, and hurried to the yard. Henry, Gordon and James were whooshing and snorting furiously, while Duck and Percy calmly sat on the points outside the shed, refusing to let the engines in. "Stop that noise!" he bellowed. "Now, Gordon!" "They won't let us in," hissed the big engine crossly. "Duck, explain this behaviour." "Oh, beg pardon, sir, but I'm a Great Western engine. We Great Western engines do our work without fuss, but we are not ordered about by other engines. You, sir, are our controller. We will, of course, move if you order us, but begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I will be glad if you would inform these, engines that we only take orders from you." The three big engines hissed angrily. "Silence!" snapped the Fat Controller. "Percy and Duck, I am pleased with your work today, but not with your behaviour tonight. You have caused a disturbance." Gordon, Henry and James sniggered. They stopped suddenly when the Fat Controller turned on them. "As for you," he thundered, "you've been worse. You made the disturbance. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders." When Percy went away, Duck was left to manage alone. He did so easily. Percy and Harold. Percy worked hard at the harbour. Toby helped, but sometimes the loads of stone were too heavy, and Percy had to fetch them for himself. Then he would push the trucks along the quay to where the workmen needed the stone for their building. An airfield was close by, and Percy heard the aeroplanes zooming overhead all day. The noisiest of all was a helicopter, which hovered, buzzing like an angry bee. "Stupid thing," said Percy. "Why can't it go and buzz somewhere else?" One day, Percy stopped near the airfield. The helicopter was standing quite close. "Hello," said Percy. "Who are you?" "I'm Harold. Who are you?" "I'm Percy." "What whirly great arms you've got!" "They're nice arms," said Harold, offended. I can hover like a bird. Don't you wish you could hover? Certainly not. I like my rails, thank you. I think railways are slow, said Harold in a bored voice. They're not much use, and quite out of date. He whirled his arms and buzzed away. Percy found Toby at the top station, arranging trucks. I say, Toby, he burst out, that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him. He collected his trucks and started off, still fuming. Soon, above the clatter of the trucks, they heard a familiar buzzing. Percy, whispered his driver, there's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him. Yes, let's, said Percy excitedly, and quickly gathering speed, he shot off down the line. The guard's wife had given him a flask of tea for elevenses. He had just poured out a cup when the van lurched and he spilt it down his uniform. He wiped up the mess with his handkerchief and staggered to the front platform. Percy was pounding along. The truck screamed and swayed while the van rolled and pitched like a ship at sea. Well, I'll be ding-dong-danged, said the guard. Then he saw Harold buzzing alongside and understood. Go it, Percy, he yelled. You're gaining. Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. Hurry, 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 he panted to the trucks. We don't want to, they grumbled, but it was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The fireman shovelled for dear life, while the driver was so excited he could hardly keep still. Well done, Percy, he shouted. We're gaining! We're going ahead! Oh, good boy! Good boy! Far ahead, a distant signal warned them that the wharf was near. Shut off steam, whistle, beep, beep, beep! Brakes guard, please! Using Percy's brakes too, the driver carefully checked the train's headlong speed. They rolled under the main line and halted smoothly on the wharf. Oh dear, groaned Percy. I'm sure we've lost. The fireman scrambled to the cab roof. We've won! We've won, he shouted, and nearly fell off in his excitement. Harold's still hovering! He's looking for a place to land! Listen, boys, the fireman called. Here's a song for Percy. Said Harold helicopter to our Percy, you are slow. Your railway is out of date and not much use, you know. But Percy with his stone trucks did the trip in record time. And we beat that helicopter on our old branch line. The driver and guard soon caught the tune, and so did the workman on the quay. Percy loved it. Oh, thank you, he said. He liked the last line best of all. Percy's promise. A mob of excited children poured out of Annie and Clarabelle one morning and raced down to the beach. They're the Vicar's Sunday School, explained Thomas. I'm busy this evening, but the station master says I can ask you to take them home. Of course I will, promised Percy. The children had a lovely day, but at tea time it got very hot. Dark clouds loomed overhead, then came lightning, thunder and rain. The children only just managed to reach shelter before the deluge began. Annie and Clarabelle stood at the platform. The children scrambled in. "Can we go home, please, station master?" asked the vicar. The station master called Percy. "Take the children home quickly, please," he ordered. The rain streamed down on Percy's boiler. "Ugh!" he shivered and thought of his nice dry shed. Then he remembered. "A promise is a promise," he told himself. "So, here goes." His driver was anxious. The river was rising fast. It foamed and swirled fiercely, threatening to flood the country any minute. The rain beat in Percy's face. "I wish I could see! I wish I could see!" he complained. They left a cutting and found themselves in water. "Oh, my wheels!" shivered Percy. "It's cold!" But he struggled on. "Whoosh!" he hissed. "It's sloshing my fire!" They stopped and backed the coaches to the cutting and waited while the guard found a telephone. He returned looking gloomy. "We couldn't go back if we wanted," he said. "The bridge near the junction is down." The fireman went to the guard's van carrying a hatchet. "Hello," said the guard. "You look fierce." "I want some dry wood for Percy's fire, please." They broke up some boxes, but that did not satisfy the fireman. "I'll have some of your floorboards," he said. "What, my nice floor?" grumbled the guard. "I only swept it this morning." But he found a hatchet and helped. Soon they had plenty of wood stored in Percy's bunker. His fire burnt well now. He felt warm and comfortable again. "Oh dear," thought Percy sadly. "Harold's come to laugh at me." Boom! Something thudded on Percy's boiler. "Oh!" he exclaimed in a muffled voice. "That's really too bad. He needn't throw things." His driver unwound a parachute from Percy's indignant front. "Harold isn't throwing things at you," he laughed. "He's dropping hot drinks for us." They all had a drink of cocoa and felt better. Percy had steam up now. "Beep, beep, thank you, Harold," he whistled. "Come on, let's go." The water lapped his wheels. "Ugh!" he shivered. It crept up and up and up. It reached his ashpan, then it sloshed at his fire. Oosh! Percy was losing steam, but he plunged bravely on. "I promised," he panted. "I promised." They piled his fire high with wood and managed to keep him steaming. I must do it," he gasped. I must. He made a last great effort and stood exhausted but triumphant on rails which were clear of the flood. He rested to get steam back, then brought the train home. "3 cheers for Percy," called the vicar, and the children nearly raised the roof. The fat controller arrived in Harold. First he thanked the men. "Harold told me you are a wizard, Percy. He says he can beat you at some things," Percy snorted, "but not at being a submarine," he chuckled. "I don't know what you've both been playing at, and I won't ask. But I do know that you're a really useful engine." "Oh, sir," whispered Percy happily. Percy takes the plunge. Sometimes Percy takes stone trucks to the other end of the line. There he meets engines from the other railway. One day, Henry wanted to rest in the shed, but Percy was talking to some tank engines. It was raining hard. Water swirled under my boiler. I couldn't see where I was going, but I struggled on. Ooh, Percy, you are brave. Well, said Percy modestly, it wasn't anything really. Water's nothing to an engine with determination. Tell us more, Percy, said the engines. What are you engines doing here? Hissed Henry. This shed is for the Fat Controller's engines. Go away, silly things, Henry snorted. They're not silly. Percy had been enjoying himself. He was cross because Henry had sent them away. They are silly, and so are you. Water's nothing to an engine with determination. Pah! Anyway, said cheeky Percy, I'm not afraid of water. I like it. He ran away singing, once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. Percy arrived home feeling pleased with himself. Silly old Henry, he chuckled. Thomas was looking at a board on the quay. It said, danger. We mustn't go past it, he said. That's orders. Why? Danger means falling down something, said Thomas. I went past danger once and fell down a mine. Percy looked beyond the board. I can't see a mine, he said. He didn't know that the foundations of the quay had sunk and that the rails now sloped downward to the sea. Stupid board, said Percy. For days and days he tried to sidle past it, but his driver stopped him every time. No, you don't, he would say. Then Percy made a plan. One day at the top station, he whispered to the trucks, Will you give me a bump when we get to the quay? The trucks were surprised. They had never been asked to bump an engine before. They giggled and chattered about it the whole way down. Whoa, Percy, whoa, said his driver, and Percy checked obediently at the distant signal. Driver doesn't know my plan, he chuckled. On, laughed the trucks. Percy thought they were helping. I'll pretend to stop at the station, but the trucks will push me past the board. Then I'll make 'em stop. I can do that whenever I like. If Percy hadn't been so conceited, he would never have been so silly. Every wise engine knows that you cannot trust trucks. They reached the station, and Percy's brakes groaned. That was the signal for the trucks. Go on, they yelled, and surged forward together. They gave Percy a fearful bump, and knocked his driver and fireman off the footplate. Ow! Said Percy, sliding past the board. The day was misty, the rails were slippery, his wheels wouldn't grip. Percy was frantic. That's enough, he hissed. But it was too late. Once on the slope, he tobogganed helplessly down, crashed through the buffers, and slithered into the sea. You are a very disobedient engine. Percy knew that voice. He groaned. The foreman borrowed a small boat and rowed the Fat Controller around. Please, sir, get me out, sir. I'm truly sorry, sir. No, Percy, we cannot do that till high tide. I hope it will teach you to obey orders. Yes, sir. Percy shivered miserably. He was cold. Fish were playing hide-and-seek through his wheels. The tide rose higher and higher. He was feeling his position more and more deeply every minute. It was nearly dark when they brought floating cranes, cleared away the trucks and lifted Percy out. He was too cold and stiff to move by himself, so he was sent to the works next day on Henry's goods train. Well, chuckled Henry. Did you like the water? No. I am surprised. You need more determination, Percy. Water's nothing to an engine with determination, you know. Ha ha! Perhaps you'll like it better next time. but Percy is quite determined that there won't be a next time. Gordon goes foreign. Lots of people travel to the big station at the end of the line. Engines from the other railway sometimes pull their trains. These engines stay the night and go home next day. Gordon was talking one day to one of these. "When I was young and green," he said, "I remember going to London. Do you know the place? The station's called King's Cross." "King's Cross?" snorted the engine. "London's Euston. Everybody knows that." "Rubbish," said Duck. "London's Paddington." "I know. I worked there." They argued till they went to sleep. They argued when they woke up. They were still arguing when the other engine went away. "Stupid thing," said Gordon crossly. "I've no patience." "Stupid yourself," said Duck. "London's Paddington. Paddington, do you hear?" "Stop arguing," James broke in. "You make me tired. You're both agreed about something anyway." "What's that?" "London's not Euston," laughed James. "Now shut up." Gordon rolled away, still grumbling. "I'm sure it's King's Cross. I'll go and prove it." But that was easier said than done. London lay beyond the big station, at the other end of the line. Gordon had to stop there. Another engine then took his train. "If I didn't stop," he thought, "I could go to London." One day he ran right through the station. Another time he tried to start before the fireman could uncouple the coaches. He tried all sorts of tricks, but it was no good. His driver checked him every time. "Oh dear," he thought sadly, "I'll never get there." One day he pulled the express to the station as usual. His fireman uncoupled the coaches, and he ran on to his siding to wait till it was time to go home. The coaches waited and waited at the platform, but their engine didn't come. A porter ran across and spoke to Gordon's driver. "The inspector's on the platform. He wants to see you." The driver climbed down from the cab and walked over to the station. He came back in a few minutes looking excited. "Hello," said the fireman. "What's happened?" "The engine for the express turned over when it was coming out the yard. Nothing else can come in or out. They want us to take the train to London. I said we would if the Fat Controller agreed. They telephoned, and he said we could do it. How's that?" "Fine," said the fireman. "We'll show them what the Fat Controller's engines can do." "Come on," said Gordon. "Let's go." He rolled quickly over the crossings and backed onto the train. It was only a few minutes before the guard blew his whistle, but Gordon thought it was ages. "Come on! Come on!" he puffed to the coaches. "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on! We're going to town, we're going to town," sang the coaches. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. "We're going to town, we're going to town, we're going to town, we're going to town." Gordon found that London was a long way away. "Never mind," he said. "I like a good long run to stretch my wheels." But all the same, he was glad when London came in sight. The Fat Controller came into his office next morning. He looked at the letters on his desk. One had a London postmark. "I wonder how Gordon's getting on," he said. The station master knocked and came in. He looked excited. "Excuse me, sir, have you seen the news?" "Not yet, why?" "Oh, just look at this, sir." The Fat Controller took the newspaper. "Good gracious me," he said. "There's Gordon. Headlines, too. famous engine at London Station. Police called to control crowds. The Fat Controller read on, absorbed. Gordon returned next day. The Fat Controller spoke to his driver and fireman. "I see you had a good welcome in London." "We certainly did, sir. We signed autographs till our arms ached, and Gordon had his photograph taken from so many directions at once that he didn't know which way to look." "Good," smiled the Fat Controller. "I expect he enjoyed himself. Didn't you, Gordon?" "No, sir, I didn't." "Why ever not?" "London's all wrong," answered Gordon sadly. "They've changed it. It isn't King's Cross any more. It's St. Pancras."
Double header. The Fat Controller gave Gordon a rest when he came back from London. He told James to do his work. James got very conceited about it. "You know, little Toby," he said one day, "I'm an important engine now. Everybody knows it. They come in crowds to see me flash by. The heaviest train makes no difference. I'm as regular as clockwork. They all set their watches by me. Never late, always on time. That's me." "Says you," replied Toby cheekily. Toby was out on the main line. The Fat Controller had sent him to the works. His parts were worn. They clanked as he trundled along. He was enjoying his journey. He was a little engine, and his tanks didn't hold much water, so he often had to stop for a drink. He had small wheels, too, and he couldn't go fast. "Never mind," he thought. "The signalmen all know me. They'll give me plenty of time." But a new signalman had come to one of the stations. Toby had wanted to take Henrietta, but the Fat Controller had said, "No! What would the passengers do without her?" He wondered if Henrietta was lonely. Percy had promised to look after her, but Toby couldn't help worrying. "Percy doesn't understand her like I do," he said. He felt thirsty and tired. He had come a long way. He saw a distant signal. "Good," he thought. "Now I can have a nice drink and rest in a siding till James has gone by." Toby's driver thought so too. They stopped by the water crane. His fireman jumped out and put the hose in his tank. Toby was enjoying his drink when the signalman came up. Toby had never seen him before. "No time for that," said the signalman. "We must clear the road for the express." "Right," said the driver. "We'll wait in the siding." "No good," said the signalman. "It's full of trucks. You'll have to hurry to the next station. They've got plenty of room for you there." Poor Toby clanked sadly away. "I must hurry, I must hurry," he panted. But hurrying used a lot of water, and his tanks were soon empty. They damped down his fire and struggled on, but he soon ran out of steam and stood marooned on the main line, far away from the next station. The fireman walked back. He put detonators on the line to warn James and his driver. Then he hurried along the sleepers. "I'll tell that signalman something," he said grimly. James was fuming when Toby's fireman arrived and explained what had happened. "My fault," said the signalman. "I didn't understand about Toby." "No, James," said his driver. "You'll have to push him." "What? Me?" snorted James. "Me? Push Toby and pull my train?" "Yes, you." "Shan't." The driver
The fireman, the passengers and the guard all said he was a bad engine. All right, grumbled James. He came up behind Toby and gave him a bump. Get on, you, he said crossly. James's driver made him push Toby all the way back to the works. It serves you right for being cross, he said. James had to work very hard, and when he reached the workstation he felt exhausted. Some little boys ran along the platform. "Coo," said one. "The express is late. A double-header, too. Do you know what I think? I think," he went on, "that James couldn't pull the train, so Toby had to help him." "Caw," said James, and disappeared in a cloud of steam. The Fat Controller's engines. One evening, Thomas brought his last train to the junction. He went for a drink. "I'm going to the big station," he said to Percy and Toby. "So are we," they answered. "Do you know," Percy went on, "I think something's up." Toby looked at the sky. "Where?" "Down here, silly," laughed Thomas. "How," asked Toby reasonably, "can something be up when it's down?" "Look," said Thomas excitedly. "Look!" 7 engines from the other railway were coming along the line. "Hello, Ginty," whistled Percy. "Hello, Pug. They're friends of mine," he explained. "I don't know the others." Ginty and Pug whistled cheerfully as they puffed through the station. "What is all this?" asked Thomas. "The Fat Controller's got a plan," answered his driver, "and he's going to tell it to us. Come on." So they followed to the big station at the end of the line, where all the engines had gone. The Fat Controller was waiting for them there. "The people of England," he said, "read about us in the books, but they do not think that we are real." "Shame!" squeaked Percy. The Fat Controller glared. Percy subsided. "So," he continued, "I am taking my engines to England to show them. Hurrah, 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 hurrah!" The engines whistled. The Fat Controller held his ears. "Silence!" he bellowed. "We start the day after tomorrow at 8 a.m. Meanwhile, as these engines have kindly come from the other railway to take your place, you will show them your work tomorrow." Next day, as Annie and Clarabelle were going to England too, Thomas and Ginty practised with some other coaches. Thomas was excited. He began boasting about his race with Bertie. "I whooshed through the tunnel and stopped an inch from the buffers, like this. Crash!" The buffers broke. No one was hurt, but Thomas's front was badly bent. They telephoned the Fat Controller. "I'll send up some men," he said, "but if they can't mend Thomas in time, we'll go to England without him." Next morning, the engines waited at the junction. Toby and Percy were each on a truck, and Duck had pushed them into place behind Edward. Henrietta stood on a siding. The Fat Controller had called her a curiosity. "I wouldn't dream of leaving you behind," he said. "I'll fit you up as my private coach." She felt very grand. Gordon, James and Henry were in front. They whistled impatiently. The Fat Controller paced the platform. He looked at his watch. "1 minute more," he said, turning to the guard. "Beep, beep, beep," whistled Thomas, and panted into the station. Annie and Clarabelle twittered anxiously. "We hope we're not late. It isn't quite 8. "Thomas," said the Fat Controller sternly, "I am most displeased with you. You nearly upset my arrangements. Thomas, abashed, arranged himself in the coaches behind Duck without saying a word. The Fat Controller climbed into Henrietta. The guard blew his whistle and waved his flag. The engines whistled, "Look out, England! Here we come!" and the cavalcade puffed off. The engines stood side by side in a big airy shed. Hundreds of people came to see them and climbed in and out of their cabs every day. They liked it at first, but presently felt very bored and were glad when it was time to go. The people along their line put the flags out and cheered them home. "We are glad to see you," they said. "Those others did their best, but they don't know our ways. Nothing anywhere can compare with our Fat Controller's engines."
Thomas the Tank Engine, you've either never been or never known a child. Thomas is quite simply the most famous locomotive there is. He and his toot-tooting railway friends were the creation of an English country parson back in the 40s. Half a century later, they're still a runaway success, with 10 million books sold and a television show seen around the world. Come with us now on a journey into the time-warped world of Thomas, his friends, and those he's made rich and famous. Welcome to the mythical island of Sodor, the green and hilly home of a little blue steam engine called Thomas. He and his friends have become heroes to millions of children around the world. Let's be honest about it, quite a few adults love him and his sunny world as well. I love the skies. Do many people say that to you?
All the time. Yes, they do. Designed specifically by my art director, who is also a pilot. So he's got a lot of knowledge of skies.
Because it's obviously drawn by a man who knows his clouds.
He does. He's up there all the time, yeah. But we have a passion for the island of Sodor, that the fluffy clouds are very important, friendly clouds, which match the character of Thomas.
Film director David Mitton loves his work. Who wouldn't? But the truth is that it demands an almost fanatical attention to detail to make the Thomas the Tank Engine television series the full steam ahead success that it's become.
It is exhausting, creatively, as well as the action of the trains and getting them right, the engines in particular, because you've got a complicity of electronics in there, the eyes working. If we get one detail wrong in foreground, we get a lot of letters.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. At last! Got him! He shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed.
In the making of the films, all the engines are treated very much like actors, and they behave like actors, and they really steam up and they go to work.
Don't you hate Britt Allcroft? She used to do what I'm doing now. Indeed, she was making a documentary about steam trains when she got the idea of buying the television rights to the Thomas the Tank Engine children's books. And now she's a millionaire.
I looked in many different directions for the cash. In the end, came back to my own doorstep and our local bank manager. But that involved mortgaging the house.
And for the price of that mortgage, in television terms at least, you own Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yes, yes.
A good investment. Fluffy clouds, sunny skies, a lovable toyland. And even if behind the scenes It really is a multi-million-dollar business. There's still plenty of room for eccentricity.
It's eaten into my soul all the time. Even dream about it now.
Dream about it?
Yeah. And the funny thing is that the dreams are generally sometimes could be better than the movie. Because I'm the engine driver, if you get my drift.
As he rumbled over the bridge,
It's
he would
true.
see
You can't spend any time around Thomas the Tank Engine without getting seriously sucked in. It's an infectious story. And like all great children's stories, it started out as a tale told to a small child. Wait a minute. I think I see the kid over there now. His name is Christopher Awdry. His father was a country parson who made up the Thomas stories for him half a century ago. The years may have passed, but whoever grows up when it comes to steam trains?
I think the fascination for, certainly from the children's point of view, is that they can actually see it working. They can see the steam, they can see the rods moving, they can see the wheels moving. You get in a modern locomotive, a diesel locomotive, you press a button and it goes brum, and hopefully it moves. This you can actually see in action. You can see the power and feel it. And there's a sort of distinctive smell about a steam engine too.
Like Wind in the Willows or Alice in Wonderland, the Thomas stories, first told to a child, were later published and were hugely successful. Of course, Christopher grew up wanting to be a writer, but not just like his dad. He decided to write detective fiction, but it was clear he really didn't have a clue. The detective novels were never published.
You see, I wanted to write, but I was also determined at that time that I didn't want to write about Thomas the Tank Engine.
Because you didn't want to be in your father's shadow.
Exactly.
But when his famous father, the Rev W Awdry, grew too old to write, the still unpublished Christopher decided to give Thomas a go. He wrote a new series of Thomas stories, and they were, of course, a runaway success. At last, Christopher was on the gravy train.
I would have liked to have made my own way by not using his characters. But the opportunity was there, and, you know, I'd have been a fool to turn it down, wouldn't I?
Absolutely. It's made you a very wealthy man, but it hasn't really changed your life.
Well, I hope it hasn't. I don't feel very wealthy.
His father is rich too, but it's even harder to tell. This is the home of the Reverend W. Pretty modest for a man whose writings have earned reputedly more than £10 million. Only the name of the house, Sodor, Thomas's Island, gives any clue about its famous occupant. What no one told me was that these days the Reverend W is a very grumpy, bedridden old man. And he's got a terrible cough, but at least he's still able to smoke. So, can you tell me where and how it all started?
Oh, this is the story I've been telling for the last 30 or 40 years. I'm sick of it.
Oh dear, this really isn't going very well at all.
But you're all behind the times. My books have been bestsellers in Australia, New Zealand, for the past 30 years.
Maybe we should have done the story 30 years ago.
Yes, you should. Not waited until I'm in my dotage.
The newspapers say you've become a multi-millionaire. Have you become a rich man?
Well, they're talking rubbish.
So you didn't make £10 million from royalties from the television?
I've got no idea how much.
And what about that television series that earned him all those royalties that he doesn't seem to know he's got? What does the creator of Thomas the Tank Engine think of his invention on television?
Like the curate egg, good in parts.
And what parts aren't good?
First two series were all right. They more or less stuck to my stories. But then the success of them made the producers get what I call big-headed. they showed their lamentable ignorance.
But they've fallen into error.
Yes.
Thomas thinks no engine works as hard as he does. He loves playing tricks on them, including Gordon, the biggest and proudest engine of all.
Some of the credit for the Thomas success must go to the voiceover man, former Beatle, Ringo Starr, who gives us the drum.
People were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen.
The rest of the family were in the sitting room one night watching television. I was going past the door and I heard this voice.
Henry was feeling stuffed up.
And I thought, that's the voice for Thomas the Storyteller. And I walked into the room and Ringo Starr was being interviewed on a chat show. So I wrote to him and we met. And I said, I think you've got the perfect voice to be Thomas the Storyteller.
Soon they could see the boys, and they all had stones.
If you follow the plot, then you know all about plucky little Thomas who shunts the carriages for the big engines like Henry, James and Gordon. Then there's the nasty Diesels, really the only villains on the happy island of Soda.
He roared, gave a great heave.
And of course, overseeing the whole railway and its operation, the Fat Controller.
Silence! Snapped the Fat Controller. Percy and Duck, I am pleased with your work today, but not with your behavior tonight. This is my railway, and I give the orders.
Here for one glorious day on a little branch line in the south of England, Thomas fans and railway buffs have joined forces to recreate, full-scale, the world of Thomas the Tank Engine. And one of the lucky enthusiasts, a local businessman, actually gets to realise his lifelong ambition to play the Fat Controller.
So how much is this a fair dinkum, Thomas?
Very much so. It is very, very much so. If you get a picture of Thomas and look at this, it is carbon copy.
And what's all this muck that I've got all over me?
Well, unfortunately,
where's all this stuff? And will it come off?
That's Australian rain.
What is it?
Yeah, it's only muck from the boiler. Bit of water.
Your trains are very messy, Fat Controller.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I did my slip. Here you go, sir.
The Fat Controller originally was introduced in the 3 railway engines as a dig at pompous officials whom I abominate.
I've never met on any story as many eccentrics as I've met on this one.
Well, all railway people are eccentric. You've got to be involved like we do. Who would come down to this place on a Saturday afternoon for no money on a gorgeous day and work on steam engines?
And get covered in
oil and everything else, play on the track, paint coaches, and just generally enjoy themselves. Cup final day in May. Where are they? They're all down here playing trains. It's in the blood.
Now, if you haven't noticed the shortage of girl trains on this line, others have. Lately, there have been shock accusations that Thomas is blatantly sexist. Well, it happened to Noddy, and it happened to Bill and Ben, the flower pot men. So is Thomas the Tank Engine now to be derailed by political correctness?
Hurry up, you.
What does Thomas think about this?
Thomas's opinion hasn't actually been asked, you see, but I have plans for that.
So there's trouble down the tracks for Thomas?
Who knows? I don't think so, really.
Meanwhile, back at the station, it's the adults who seem to be having all the fun. It makes you wonder whether this whole Thomas the Tank Engine business really is just for kids. Look at the way you're dressed. When are you going to grow up? You're a middle-aged man.
Middle-aged man? Good heavens, son, not a middle-aged man at all. Never. Never. I've been like this since I'm a kid. I've loved the train since I'm a little boy, and I still do.
What do you want children to get out of Thomas the Tank Engine?
Entertainment.
No more than that.
That's what they were written for.
degrees in Toronto. Now you're up to date. I'm Dan Turner, Chum News. In for Russ the Cloud. Good afternoon. It's 2:02 in Toronto.
Sounds like a dirty job, and one that can end up badly for everyone. Doesn't it sort of remind you of James and Percy?
It was a splendid morning on the island of Sodor. James was feeling very pleased with himself. His red paint gleamed in the sunshine as he sped along the line. He reached the junction just as Percy puffed in with some freight cars. James was surprised to see him.
What are you doing here, Percy? You should be at the station by now.
He's Canadian. Yeah.
How do you know he's Canadian?
He talks like a Canadian, like me and all the other people. And there's another engine who is called Donald, and he's from the West, the Wild West. He has the same name as me, D-O-N-A-L-D, Donald, and he's a twin like me.
I think people were looking for something that was totally nonviolent, totally interesting, a little bit educational because it teaches them about train travel and everything. I think he just came along at exactly the right time. Maybe he was discovered 40 years later, but I think that's why he's so magical.
Good morning. My talk is entitled Growing Up with Thomas the Tank Engine. My father's love of trains came from my grandfather, who was also a vicar. While Dad was still a toddler, my grandfather used to take him for walks, and they invariably ended up near the railway track, where they would stand and watch steam trains together.
I suppose our childhood memory, lying in bed at night, one would hear a heavy goods from South Wales or elsewhere come into the station, stop and crow for a banker. The banker would come out of its shed, buffer up behind, and crow to be ready, and then the two engines would start off up the hill. And the boy's imagination, you could hear the two engines talking to each other. I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And the banker behind, oh yes you can, oh yes you can, oh yes you can. If you can. And you'd hear them working their way up the hill. The goods engine complaining and the banker saying in effect, you're making a fuss about nothing. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I suppose that childhood memory was the basis of these subsequent stories.
Winter came, and with it dark, heavy clouds full of snow. "I don't like it," said Thomas's driver. "A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us." "Pooh," said Thomas, seeing the snow melt on the rails. "Soft stuff, nothing to it."
Wilbert became a clergyman. He became a clergyman eventually, I suspect, because his father had become a clergyman.
he had his second curacy. He was down in Wiltshire. He was quite a young clergyman. And he believed, with the outbreak of the Second World War, that he had to follow a pacifist line. He had to be a pacifist. Now, this wasn't a particularly popular thing to believe at the time. And Wilbert stood by this belief absolutely, determinedly, even...
One of the engines in Edward's shed was called Gordon. He was very big and very proud. "You watch me this afternoon, little Edward," he boasted, "as I rush through with the express. That'll be a splendid sight for you."
My father did have problems with artists who didn't know anything about trains, and they would draw the same engine differently on several different pages. And of course small children are very quick to pick this up, and they write to the author and point out these mistakes.
Well, Awdry was fairly specific about which way he wanted the engines to face, and so you were stuck with having either the back end of an engine with no face on at all, or else some very peculiar view where you could just about see the face. But generally it was a fairly straightforward process, provided I remembered which way round engines faced on the railway line.
I suppose what struck me most about them was the incredible vivid colour. I mean, it seems like a rather banal thing to say, but if you think about the 50s, most books were fairly grey, and those books that weren't were printed on a kind of rather sort of browny paper, and maybe with just 2 or 3 colours, and there was something about these tank engine books that they were incredibly vivid, incredibly bright, and almost kind of glowing. Now, I mean, there's several moments in the Thomas the Tank Engine books that I can remember and I've carried with me for all my life, and I suppose one of the key ones is the moment when Henry gets bricked up in the very first of the Thomas Tank Engine books, the 3 railway engines. Now, this has just been handed to me, and I've just seen this for the first time for something like what must be 45 years. And I went, this is incredible, because I've held the picture in my head, I've held the picture there, and then suddenly I'm seeing it, and it's an extraordinary thing in which the two things are meeting.
It's more real than we could possibly imagine, and it seems to remind us of a world that is gone. As you look at those drawings, first drawn by C. Reginald Dalby, you see those green hills and the blue distant mountains and the sea beyond, and you see the cows strolling through the meadows, and you see the children standing alongside the line waving at the trains as they go by. That is an evocation of an age that is gone, and it's always created in glowing iridescent colours, and those colours and those pictures leap off the page at you.
Some of the stones hit Henry's boiler and spoilt his paint. One hit the fireman on the head as he was shoveling coal, and others broke the carriage windows. It's a shame, hissed Henry. "They've broken our glass, they've broken our glass," sobbed the coaches.
I'm scraping off glue that's imposing on the image of the painting, so I can clean it off and it's good for reproduction. This type of series has got lots of glue damage. Some has had some kind of skinning of the surface. The paper's come off and I've had to replace the paper and paint over it. Or lots of the paint has popped off from the surface of the picture and I've had to repaint the image.
The driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the brake van. The guard pulled out his watch. "The kipper's due," he said. "Who cares?" said the fireman. "This is good cocoa."
"Cocoa, my dear engine," he gasped. "Save me!" Cocoa quickly sized up the situation and sent Bill and Ben about their business. They were cheeky at first, but Boko threatened to take away the trucks of coal he'd bought for them. That made them behave at once. Gordon thought he was wonderful. Those little demons, he said. How do you do it? Ah, well, said Boko, it's just a knack. Gordon thinks to this day that Boko saved his life, but we know that the twins were only teasing, don't we?
Reading the stories nowadays, one does get the impression that, to begin with, say for the first 5 books, the stories are told on a much, no, not a much younger level, but on at a more young level than they later became. Father developed as a writer, of course, and I think the stories developed with him. He began to use more complicated plots.
And then you've got to remember that you're not merely writing for children, you're writing for the unfortunate people, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, grandfathers, grandmothers, who've got to read the children, the stories aloud. Not just once, but over and over and over again. And so the story must be easy to read.
Henry comes home and it's his birthday. And I said, happy birthday. There's this big hole where all the presents have to go in there. And there's trees and you know these bits on the top of the engines? Well, you know, what is it? I forgot now. Henry is chosen to take some fish to some place, and then he goes really fast and he slips off the line, and then he had new coal when he was going, and he got his old coal back, but he got a new shape in body.
That again and again the books are returning to the idea of order and who's in charge. And obviously we know the Fat Controller, that he's the big chief. And then we have the engines, and there's a hierarchy between the engines as to who's entitled to pull the express trains, and little Thomas the Tank, who thinks that he's a bit better than that. And then below that, below the level of the engines, you've got the carriages.
The passengers came and argued too, but Henry would not move. The fat director, who was on the train, told the guard to get a rope. "We'll pull you out," he said.
Drive up! Why are you late?
We've got no train left on our toilet.
I'm afraid that's not good enough. You're very late. You've thrown everything out of Canker. Oh, very sorry. I'll have to ask you to come and see me afterwards, okay? Who is the driver, anyway?
Mr. Malcolm.
Malcolm? Barry Malcolm? Oh, well, that explains a lot. Right. Tell him I'd like to see him afterwards. Good.
I was rather annoyed with bureaucrats in high places who issued directives but didn't do anything themselves to help implement them. And that's what the first fat director was inclined to do. 1, 2, 3, push, he said, but didn't push himself. My doctor has forbidden me to push, he said.
There is certainly an analogy to be drawn between the fact that the engines are governed by a sort of omnipresent being, and if you care to equate the Fat Controller with God in that sense, then fine. I don't think really that that was the original concept, but Father being a clergyman, maybe it was a subconscious one.
Awdry's fed into them, really, the way in which children relate to adults, That's actually what you're talking about. You're talking about children in families and children in schools and the hierarchical world that children belong to, and younger children and older children. And Awdry very cleverly has, in a sense, taken those ideas about hierarchy and order and put them on to objects that we used to see around us the whole time.
I don't set out to write a moral story. When I was young, we used to, on Sundays, we used to have to read horribly boring moral stories about good little boys and girls who, in our opinion, my brothers and I opinion, wanted kicking rather than... They were so beastly good. And they were held up as moral examples. Well, my stories are nothing like that. The engines are have human characteristics. Like children, faced with a prohibition, as every child does, they push it and push it and push it to see how far they can go without bringing trouble on themselves. And then they do find it, but in my engines, they may be punished, but they're not scrapped. They have to express sorrow and intention of amendment, and then they're brought back into the family, so to speak.
Well, Thomas, so you and your driver have been fishing, but fish doesn't suit you, and we must get them out. So the driver and the fireman fetched rods and nets, and they all took turns at fishing in Thomas's tank, while the fat controller told them how to do it.
Thank you.
There we are. Your Callum, are you?
Yes.
That's all right.
No. That's lovely, isn't it? Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
you'll enjoy that story.
In the early 80s, someone called Britt Allcroft came along. She is a businesswoman, and her children had loved the railway stories. The books had been going strong for over 35 years and were obviously here to stay. So she had talks with my father about making a TV series of the stories.
What first attracted me to the stories were and still are the characters, the adventures, the situations they get into. And this is what made me want to bring them to life on the screen, with all the things that a multi-dimensional world can do, with music and sound effects. And I think that the fact that the characters are largely steam trains, although not all of them, has an appeal, because I think the sound of a train whistle has a universal appeal.
What we're waiting for is a whole parade of engines coming past the station, which you see. You've got Thomas, Toby and Percy, who are quite astounded by this great parade of engines coming past. This is the story where it's Fat Controller's engines, where actually all the major engines are all going off to London to a big show for all the kids. Pleasantly animated, looking at your sins here.
Yes.
I think that one probably shows the station structure.
I think yes, if you have that. Well, you've got 3 angles on there, haven't you?
The filmic translations of these things are very difficult in many ways, because there's a terrific difference from a chap sitting on an end of a bed telling a little chap in bed, which you probably know yourself, where you can stop between sentences and really get into detail because he's asking you the questions. In filming it, you've got to explain all the questions filmically there so that there's no mistake, there's no misunderstanding, and the story is clear.
One video is when Thomas wants to go fishing, and in the end he gets some water from the river and he gets fish in his boiler, and then they have to fish it out, and then they have a supper of fish and chips.
It was old and had 5 holes, so they had to fill it, pull it up and empty it into Thomas's tank as quickly as they could, several times over.
The TV series only started off because previously the engine series were bestsellers. Over the years, the engine series had got up to 8 million. It was only then that Bertolkoff and Co. thought it might be a good thing to cash in on.
Do you feel that those television programs are still your work?
No. Some of them, some of them are based rather loosely on my stories, but they're so obsessed with the popularity of Thomas that they have what I can only call crane-shunted Thomas to all sorts of unlikely places in order to get him into or force him into a particular story, whether the story was written with Thomas in mind or not.
I'm just doing some black and white initial ideas for Thomas's 50th birthday for the point of sale that we're going to be producing. The first one I came up with was having Thomas on a sort of like a landscape, just a flat piece of card that will have Thomas moving across and out to the trees and the bushes, which is quite a simple way that probably work using different mechanisms. But I think the one that's going to be most exciting is having Thomas coming out the shed and the doors opening at the same time.
I think we've probably published more than 50 million Thomas books, all in all, if you count in the American and Japanese editions along with the English ones. Although Thomas had been very successful in the first 40 years, in the last decade, sales have skyrocketed. And in very general terms, our own publishing revenues, which used to be in the environs of about $250,000 a year, are now probably $5 million a year.
Now on to customer promotions. Claire, we've got a good, we've had some good presentations with Smiths, Dillons, etc. How much commitment do you think we've got so far?
Well, I mean, they all say they're interested. I think, I mean, it's really now that we've got to get back to them and start firming things up. I think on the Smiths side, they said that they'd run a gondola promotion, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, well, we've got a budget of 100,000 above and below the line, so let's make the most of it. It's not often we get that sort of money to play with on our marketing budget.
I just picked up, just starting from the book principle, Thomas Noisy Book, and I've had wonderful fun with this because we can hear the train and the coaches and the whistles and even a helicopter. And I don't know how he got in there, but that's the cops, and then my favourite.
Really useful engine. Really
This, of course, is the fun part of the campaign. It's where we get Thomas the Tank Engine onto the London city streets in the form of a London taxicab. And
Absolutely.
Having rolling round the city centre in London. This is the final design before it actually goes to the taxi company.
I think it works really well. I think the decals come up well.
Well, we even put some on the roof as well, so that people on buses can see it. I've got a feeling.
Brilliant idea.
I've got a feeling that a lot of city centre gents are going to get some pangs of
boyhood.
Exactly.
But of course, you've got a whole apparatus now that supports Thomas the Tank Engine. You've got the videos, you've got the TV programmes, you've got the posters, you've got the models. And that, in fact, of course, is like a great whole world that you can now inhabit.
If the audience embrace the characters and the stories, whom they first discover on the screen, maybe they first discover them in the books, but maybe they first discover them on the screen, that they will then want these characters and stories as part of their life, whether it be as toys or as a notepad or a pair of shoes or whatever.
It's the perfect product because it's not seasonal, it sells all the year round, but interesting enough also it allows you to produce a very good quality product. In turnover terms we do around £4.5 million a year on Thomas. He was very, very successful. In the States, for example, we'll probably sell around 12 million Thomas characters. But Thomas has gone to Australia, and Thomas is also very big in Japan now.
I think that stories have transcended national borders because basically they are universal, and small children are alike really all around the world. The gist is the strong storyline, the fun characters, and I think that in certain cultures where railways are a feature, such as in Japan and Norway, interesting enough, the series really has taken hold. I mean, it's interesting, in Japan the books were very popular long before the television series, and I do think that's because in Japan trains are a very important part of daily life.
日本におけるトーマスの市場規模で、過去何年かあるんですが、その中で一番大きかった年が約市場規模で170億円ほどの規模になりました。
機関車トーマス。トーマスとゴードンというお話。トーマスは小さなタンク機関車。イギリスのソドー島の大きな駅で働いている。
子どもたちはね、あれがイギリスのものだって分かっている子たちっていうのはいないと思うんですね。一緒に、ポンキッキという番組で放送されてるんですが、ポンキッキーズ、ごめんなさい、最近ポンキッキーズという番組になって タイトルが変わったんですけど、ポンキッキーズを見てるお母さん方もトーマスが
We have brought these stories on the screen to countries as diverse as Japan and the United States is in such a way as they can be embraced by people in those countries, and they're not kind of imposed on them. All our experience is that, for instance, in Japan, Japanese audiences embrace these characters and stories as their own. They become kind of indigenous to the country.
Brit has unfortunately written some of her own stories and sells them under the legend based on the Rev Awdry's Railway series. Her stories are based on fantasy rather than fact.
The first two sets of videos were, in my mind, quite good because they stuck in the main to my stories. There's a success, I think, made the producers somewhat big-headed, and in the third series they thought that they could write my stories for them. In so doing, they only revealed their lamentable ignorance of railway practice. For instance, the video called Henry's Forest.
Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
The story was about Henry, an engine. Henry is, in that story, is enraptured by the forest which he goes through. Now, what interest does a steam locomotive have in scenery? On one occasion in the story, the driver says to Henry, "We've made good time over the last section, let's stop for a bit." Well, what responsible driver would stop as if he was in a roadside lay-by? You can't do it. They've shown a lamentable ignorance of Rule 55.
You're no stranger to Rule 55 then?
Well, I am strange to all the rules, actually, because I have to refer to it, but you can tell me what Rule 55 is.
Rule 55 is a protection of trains when they come to a stand, reminding of the signalman of the position of your train, sending your fireman within a minute, 2 minutes to the signal box to sign the book and ensure that the signalman is aware of your position on the track. That's Rule 55.
Autumn was changing the leaves from green to brown. The fields were changing too, from yellow stubble to brown earth. As Thomas puffed along, he heard the chug, chug, chug of a tractor at work.
My father, a widower, now 83, still lives in his own home with a resident housekeeper carer. Dad has been called the Puff Puff Parson. He has even been called eccentric. The creator of these stories sometimes wonders whether he dreamt up Thomas or Thomas dreamt up him. but the Reverend Awdry is destined to be remembered as the Thomas the Tank Engine man.
The children and their parents are still buying these books in thousands about an age that is gone. I'm on a par with Billy Bunter or William. Nobody goes to school at a place like Billy Bunter, and nobody lives nowadays in a sort of suburban house like Richmond Crompton's William. But there it is.
There's Thomas the Tank goes fishing, or there's Thomas the Tank and Henry the Green Engine. Now tell me, Katie, if it's wrong.
You'd like one like... I can see no end to it. I think it's great fun to sit back and watch other people being sceptical about it, when I have that gut feeling that Thomas will go on forever because I've worked with him for so long, and I have seen no evidence of children going off him.
How would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as an author who perhaps understood children, perhaps how they, in a small sense, understood perhaps how their minds work. I don't know.
An intimate profile of a comic genius next on BBC Two. Arena tells the Peter Sellers story in a few moments.